I can't tell the broke boy. I can't tell the broke boy. I can't tell the broke boys. I can't tell the broke boy. I can't tell the broke boy. No. I can't tell the broke boy. I can't tell the. That nigga's crazy. Hopping in, bitch, and I saw it to be. Snakes in the grass, so they harder to see. My brother would give up his life to the O. He told me he'd go be a martyr for me. Said that she ready to corner the 6. I hit up Pauline and charter the P. Ain't really leave, but I'm back. I'm back. I'm back. I'm riding around in Atlanta with Sad, cause that nigga been going harder than me. Nothing to change, I'm just harder to please. Ferrari is making an SUV. We ain't got a choice, we ordering these. Shout out Noel for recording the V's. He know where this shit about to go, cause nobody touching the flow. They say you alone at the top, but it's gotta be lonely below. You just getting ready to diss, but don't even mention a hoe. And don't even mention a foe, unless you boys tryna go broke.
Whoa, I got more stripes than Adidas.
Yeah, I got the stripes to fuck.
I don't chase bitches, I leave them.
Hoes screaming like I'm just.
I don't get mad, I get.
Florabella on my screen. Her smile, it shines so bright. She's a queen with every scene. In the morning or the night, recipes and good vibes flow. Every video a gem. Her confidence, it grows and grows. We're inspired like her friends. Unstoppable Flora, she's got that power. Spreading her aura, blossoming like a flower. Through the highs and all the lows, she remains so strong. Her spirit always glows. She's where we all belong. With every like and every share, we feel her energy. No storm too strong, she can't bear. She's setting us all free. Unstoppable Flora, she's got that power. Spreading her aura, blossoming like a flower. Recipes and good vibes flow. Every video a gem. Her confidence, it grows and grows. We're inspired like her friends. Unstoppable Flora, she's got that power. Spreading her aura, blossoming like a flower. Through the highs and all the lows, she remains so strong. Her spirit always glows. She's where we all belong. With every like and every share, we feel her energy. No storm too strong, she can't bear. She's setting us all free. Unstoppable Flora, she's got that power. Spreading her aura, blossoming like a flower. Through the highs and all the lows, she remains so strong. Her spirit always glows. She's where we all belong.
Battles got power, Florabella stands tall. Every drip, every drop, watch the haters fall. Channel sharp as thorns, ain't taking no mess. Scroll through her feed, feel that queen's finesse. Vines tangle tight, but Flora breaks free. Roots so deep, can't mess with her tree. From the mud she rises, roses from the dirt. Every comment section she lays down hurt. Flora's anthem, blooming under pressure. Resilient, resolving, no lesser. Florabella's reign strong and relentless. Beauty in battle, queen sure defenseless. From the garden green to the concrete wall, Florabella, unstoppable nature's child. Leaves whisper secrets, she's the loudest shout. From the channel buzzing, she never backs out. Seed of strength, through seasons she grows. In the face of doubt, her spirit glows. Cameras ain't a limit, she branches out. Thorns in her crown, she wears it no doubt. Flora's anthem, blooming under pressure. Resilient, resolving, no lesser. Florabella's reign strong and relentless. Beauty in battle, queen sure defenseless. Flora's anthem, blooming under pressure. Resilient, resolving, no lesser. Florabella's reign strong and relentless. Beauty in battle, queen sure defenseless.
All right, people. Sorry very much. Sorry very much. For a second I bumped into something, so I thought my internet completely got out of here. But I see it. It looks like it appeared back. I don't know. You guys tell me. Tiny John says, "What are you talking about now?" Well, just make sure you take a seat and you guys, pay close attention. This is a very important subject. Um,
I can't tell the bro
Let me just make use of all the tools in my toolbox, set the tone for the show. That way we can get going. Nothing. My favorite type of things are free. Let's see who we got going. Tiny Justin. Okay, we'll talk about that. All right, so as you guys can see, that's the subject we have today. We're talking about BPD. All right, let me just adjust the sound in my background so it's getting too much, and then we'll get into the show. All right, hold on. To buy another one of these already.
I got more stripes
Here
than
we go.
Adidas. I don't take pictures, I leave 'em. I don't get mad, I get even. I
All
don't
right.
get mad, I get even.
I hope everybody is doing well today.
Foundation she wearing, she
I hope it's really well. We still have
must be Coach K, 'cause you ain't beat. I'm on the jet like my last name.
the sound of me, your speaker. All right, so I hope everybody's doing well today. As we guys know, my subject and my subject matter usually is around these type of subjects, mental health. But specifically, I am doing a little series on personality disorders. Obviously, we started with antisocial personality disorder a couple weeks ago, or not a couple weeks ago at this point, probably just like a week or so ago. Um, and before that, we talked about narcissistic personality disorder and traits and things like that. Um, Tiny Jazz, you be talking to yourself? He says, "Yes, I'm doing well. Thanks for asking." Well, that's good to hear. And I hope all of you guys are doing well on this Sunday afternoon. I just wanted to get in a quick show, or not quick, but I wanted to get in the show before I go this evening. I have a bunch of stuff to do. I'm going to be going to the airport, dropping people off and stuff. So I don't have as much time to linger longer with you guys here tonight, or this afternoon, I should say. But I wanted to get into the subject. UKIT says, "Yes, I'm doing well. I'm on the train heading in to make the dough." Nice. That's awesome. Glad you're getting ready to make a bag or two. That's what we all should be focused on right now. Look at the economy. Hey, QKit, not QKit, Robin M says, "Hey, Flora. Hey, how are you doing? My day is going well so far. It's a little busy. I've kind of been up and at 'em for a while, trying to get everything arranged and all that. Are you still doing the dating show?" Yes, but I think the time's gonna have to change, like I said, because I'm gonna be going to the airport in a few hours to drop some people off. And then I want to get some stuff done tonight. So I don't know if it's going to be tonight, but it's definitely still going to happen. Give me 1 second, guys. Give me 1 second.
Battle's got power, Florabella stands tall. Every drip, every drop, watch the haters fall. Channel sharp as thorns, ain't taking no mess. Scroll through her feed, feel that queen's finesse. Vine tangle tight, but Flora breaks free. Roots so deep, can't mess with her tree. From the mud she rises, roses from the dirt. Every comment section she lays down hurt. Flora's anthem, blooming under pressure. Resilient resolve, ain't no lesser. Florabella's reign strong in the landless.
All right, sorry, guys. Yes, so let me get into the conversation. Now, I don't know what makes you guys think these subjects are new, so that's why I just like to give you guys a little introduction. I do know but I hid a lot of my videos because the content was sort of getting diluted by drama and things that people are trying to do to engage. Obviously, they need some engagement in their channel. You know, the videos look fairly lonely unless they're talking about somebody. So I have been talking about these subjects for quite a while. If you go to my videos, the videos that are on my channel right now, I recently released the videos that were sort of the popularized ones that I did about a year ago, including the green-eyed monster, so like envious, someone who's envious and things like that, narcissistic personality disorder, but specifically the gaslighting trait. So this is a subject matter that I have been doing for quite some time, but I'm getting back into it. So if you guys wanted to go and look over that, just sort of see what the different subjects that I've been talking about, feel free to do that. I know you guys have been coming here, but maybe you haven't seen all my content. So if you wanted to go back and look at those videos, then do so. Are you going to be a contestant on the dating show, Robin? These people are strange. Don't listen to Tiny Draws. It's going to be great. It's not going to have any weirdos. Hopefully, with the rules, we can eliminate those people and make it really fun for you guys. All right, let me put my background. All right, let's see what else we got in the chat. Who else we got here? We had Jesse rolling his eyes. Obviously, he's always here. He's always ready to take notes. We have Victor. What's going on, Victor? We have Miss Wonderful Wheat Bread. She says, make sure you guys are hitting the like button while you're here. Please do hit the like button. It helps for engagement. It helps for pushing me out into the algorithm, opening up audiences and things like that. So I would greatly appreciate that. And I appreciate you, Miss Wheat Bread. She says, hey, Flora, I hope you're doing well. I'm doing good. It's Sunday. I'm alive, I'm breathing, I'm well. You know, all of those things are important factors. So yes, I'm doing very well. Thanks for asking. Hope you're doing good as well. Robin says, now you got incels talking about female orgasms. They need to worry about getting Gucci first. Robin, I need like a danger sign in front of your comments so I know what I'm reading or what I'm about to read. All right, because you always got some funny shit to say. But yeah. Flip that P to a B, bussy. Oh Lord, you kid, where you're funny. You're a lot. Okay. But you know, we're back today with another installment of personality disorders, and we're specifically focusing today on borderline, and we're also going to talk about the trait of mirroring. Now, even though mirroring isn't specific to any particular disorder, you hear about mirroring in narcissism, you hear about it in borderline, which is sort of in borderline, it's more so used as a trait to connect to an individual, which we'll talk about more, and we'll get into some other things that are sort of related to this. So I'm going to be focused on personality disorders, but specifically borderline personality and traits of narcissism that include mirroring and things like that. So Hopefully you guys enjoy this discussion. Hopefully you guys can get some information from this that will encourage you, whether it's to seek treatment, to get a further understanding of your conditions and things that you're already dealing with, or if it's to, just pass along the information to somebody else. Whatever you're here for, I hope you guys are ready for a interesting discussion. All right. So we're going to start off sort of defining borderline personality, because like all the personality disorders, we know that these are characterized by problems with interpersonal relationships, and so people with this disorder likely don't have stable friendships, stable relationships, stable even connections with their family members and things like that. There's just a lot of variance in how these people who these people are interacting, how long those relationships last, and things like that. All right. It is a complex condition because it's not just about how they're viewing other people, but it's specifically how their view of themselves distorts their behavior. Jesse says, "Who here has that disorder?" Jesse, when it comes to mental health disorders, you always need to consult a clinician. We said you. She said you might, Jesse. Anybody might, right? I think anybody at any point in time could have a particular disorder and maybe not know. So that's why it's good to like sort of look over um, all these different disorders and seek proper treatment, seek a mental health professional that can actually diagnose you. That's a clinical therapist, clinical psychologist, psychiatrist. All those individuals have the qualifications to let you know if you have a personality disorder. But today we're just going to be sort of talking about it, not who has it. So keep that in mind. All right. So BPD is also characterized by intense, unstable emotions in relationships, as well as insecurity and self-doubt, right? So those kind of things are very hot button. Borderline, to me, the way it's described sort of comes across in some ways as like bipolar, where there's those extreme emotions, um, sort of very intense. It feels very urgent when they're feeling it, even though it might just be, something they need to do to not feel. It's almost like that trait in the one we just talked about. I forget the exact name. Sorry. What was it again? Histrionic. It's almost like the histrionic where they need the validation. For them, it's like they need to feel like validated by an individual person. So it's not just needing validation, but like needing it from an individual, needing a group of people, needing certain people to validate you. It makes for a very painful experience. All right. So people with the condition have described BPD as the feeling of having an exposed nerve ending, essentially leaving someone to be easily triggered. Right. So that's not in any way to shame people for this. Having triggers and things like that, a lot of the times they need to be dealt with. We have to find coping skills and coping mechanisms to deal with them. So somebody who's easily triggered, it's just there's no awareness there of the little things, right? Certain things just can't be controlled. They just can't control if an individual or a group of people is accepting of them and things like that. You know what I mean? So when you have that uncertainty, there's going to be a lot of feelings of distress, a lot of intense feelings that are just sort of there. Um, Everything I would diagnose meant easy. You see it on social media everywhere. Yeah, this is like the triggered stuff that comes in here, because this is actually a disorder that's very common among both genders. So, I like that you guys are here, but I just don't know if you're actually listening. Hey, Daniel Barry, I hope you're having a good Sunday. Thanks for joining us today. This picture is supposed to give you like a better example of what it looks like, right? You have this sort of looking self, like the brain is overreacting, the romantic feelings, the heart is overreacting. All of it is just sort of like an irrational play that's happening in somebody's head. Like this is all how you're viewing yourself. It's not actually how people are treating you, things like that. All right, so easily triggered. Dr. Romney is going to explain for us a sort of what these episodes look like, because a lot of the times, like bipolar people with BPD go through episodes of those intense emotions that they just feel like they can't control. All right, so let me pull up the link. Sorry, guys. My mouse has been sticking for like the last week. So, all right. We're going to do that. And then we're going to go. And this is Med Circle. So Med Circle is a really good resource. We can't see anything for. Oh, okay. I haven't put it up yet. Give me a second. You guys couldn't see my PowerPoint though. I wonder why it's doing that. All right. Let me see here. I wonder if that's like a copyright thing. Flora, I'm coming to your show all on behalf of the He-Man Woman Haters Club. Well, welcome. I know a lot of you guys are making your way here, from that organization. So any representation and support of my channel is appreciated. You don't have to feel upset about that. Okay, so now you guys can see the slides though, right? Okay. And not the slides, the YouTube video, which is fine. I don't know why it's like that. I might have to use another screen. All right, so we're going to sort of look at from Dr. Ramani what a borderline episode looks like. So again, we're looking at those like intense emotions, sort of feeling like this sense of urgency for the person to validate you, urgency for the person to like you, things like that. All right, let me play this video.
You can watch the best parts of this series at medcircle.com.
Hey YouTube, I'm Kyle Kittleson here with Dr. Ramani. We just finished filming a fantastic series on MedCircle about borderline personality disorder. But Dr. Ramani, I was looking on YouTube and a lot of people are out there claiming and talking about having or experiencing a BPD episode. Is that the right terminology, and what are they referring to?
Victor for $5, he says Lemon character lifting baby Lemon in the air to congratulate him. Oh, is that a picture? Sorry, my chat can't see that. Thank you for the $5 super sticker, Victor. I appreciate it. All right, so we're going to sort of get into what this looks like.
And I think that in the world of mental health, we have sort of what we talk about in what we as practitioners talk about, and then there's the experiences of people who are living with the disorder. So I don't ever want to like say, oh, you're saying something that's incorrect, but I also think for people who are watching it, what it likely means is that at a time of it, because it's not an episodic illness per se, right? So borderline personality disorder, like all personality disorders, there's a constancy to it. But there are times when that borderline personality style can result in periods of like really having a ramp up where you're triggered, and that could be manifested by rage. That could be manifested by a sense of almost panic, a person almost looking disoriented. So the people watching this person will say, what the heck is going on? This is not the person I was just talking to.
Right.
So the idea of an episode is really the sense of that the person with borderline personality is going about their life, and then something, a conflict, a trigger, a stressor happens, and then they have a reaction to it. We do know that borderline personality is characterized by often disproportionate reactions to triggers and stimuli. And the people who have borderline personality will be the first to acknowledge it, saying, yeah, that was probably too much. I just couldn't help myself.
Yeah.
All right, so obviously there, she kind of breaks it down a little bit better for us. So even though it's not really an episode, it is sort of that spike in the panic, the intense emotions, the intense anger, rage, whatever emotion that person's expressing in a moment. It's a huge spike. And the person does sort of feel like they can't control it, right? It's just sort of brought on by whatever feelings or non-feelings that they're having in that moment. So even though it's not necessarily an episode, you are sort of seeing somebody coming across very, very agitated, right? You might be in a regular environment with them, just sort of chilling, and then boom, they have this heightened sense of like, oh, I'm very angry, or I'm upset, or whatever the case may be, right? So though it's not like characterized by like episodes where you'll see people sort of breaking down or just kind of having a moment where they're like super tearful, super angry, when stressful things happen, their mood, their emotions become super heightened. right? And I think this is a main reason why this disorder a lot of times gets confused with bipolar, right? Because bipolar sort of has that same explosive nature, right? It seems to be triggered by something. But I think bipolar, when we look more at that, which we're going to do a little bit later, that's one that you hear about all the time. So I don't really, want to spend too much time on bipolar. But that's one where it's like their emotions are all over the place. Versus this, it seems like something sort of has to trigger this reaction. All right, so let's kind of get a little bit more into what an episode looks like.
They feel that there's no other way to respond in that moment. And so that is what is meant by the episode. The episode itself is not a clinical term.
Right.
It's not something we track and say, oh, we're looking for certain kinds of episodes.
Yep. I would say for sure at work too. And I think, like, I'm not saying I work for a narc boss, but if you have a boss who has maybe some narcissistic traits, I think you might see this often too, where it's like this high kick. Like when they're upset, they're almost, they have like a trigger reaction where they're explosive, they're angry, they're volatile, right? This is definitely something I think you would see at work in terms of an episode.
Episodes, it's likely that a person who's dysregulated like this will have a moment, an episode, if you will, where they're hyperreacting, but it's not an episodic illness by definition.
I want to ask our YouTube audience to leave a comment in the section of this video explaining whether you yourself has experienced any of the traits of borderline personality disorder. Oh, well, we're just boring Callie. She said later. Later, guys. Callie doesn't want to read your comment, but I do. If you've experienced anything personally from BPD, or if you know somebody who has BPD and what they've experienced, I'd be interested to see what those unique experiences look like. Now, on YouTube, you have addressed the 9 traits of borderline personality disorder, but you also gave our viewers in our new series on MedCircle where the DSM is taking how we diagnose and how we meet that criteria. Now, it's too long to get into for a YouTube clip, but can you give them a little more information on what we covered in the series as it relates to the DSM?
So, these newer models that look at how the person's personality functions both in the realm of themselves and in how they interact with other people, and sort of where their vulnerabilities are in terms of how their identity, their own self-direction, empathy in their world, and intimacy. And then we also talk about the kinds of traits associated with personality disorder, such as borderline personality. There are 5 traits that the DSM talks about that are potentially problematic if we have a higher level of those traits, and how those get in the way, and those specific patterns in borderline personality related to negative emotionality, being impulsive or disinhibited, and in terms of being antagonistic or somewhat hostile at times.
All right, so I wanted to touch on that part because there are parts of it. So even though in these conversations we never seek to try to demonize people who have this disorder, for example, but we do have to understand that the range of traits does create an outcome where these people might have negative emotions that are harmful to other people. For example, the hostility, the antagonism, right? Wanting people to engage with you in a negative way, right? Wanting them to feel the same sort of heightened negative emotions that they're getting. So like inciting a reaction. These are types of behaviors that you'll sometimes see in borderline people that does cause issues in their life. So although having a mental illness is definitely not a cause to say that somebody doesn't have accountability or there's something wrong with them that we should excuse it, there are parts of the disorder that cause their inability, make them incapable of realizing how their behavior can impact others in a negative way, right? Needing to be volatile and antagonistic as a part of your personality, like eventually that's going to cause some issues in your life. So though you can attribute that to somebody with BPD, it's still not an excuse, right? There's still accountability there. And that's why they're taught like coping mechanisms and things that can help them deal with those needs to be antagonistic, the need to be hostile, right? Learning to stop those negative emotions, right? So again, I'm not trying to demonize anybody who has these types of disorders, but there are negative life outcomes that can come from these things. All All right. So Robin says, I think an example of bipolar is when you react to things opposite from what the normal reaction should be. I can see that a little bit. I don't think that it's so much opposite, but I think it's like overdone, right? So like someone might, for example, step on your shoe, and instead of you realizing that it was probably just a character, it was just done because they were walking too quickly trying to get to their destination or whatever, you might blow up and be like, what the F is wrong with you? Why are you stepping on my shoe? What's wrong with you, dumb? You know, you might have that crazy reaction because it's like, okay, I just stepped on your shoe. We're in a very populated area right now. Maybe we're in the subway station. Maybe we're in a bus station, whatever. Like, this is clearly going to be a fast-paced environment. Blowing up on somebody for stepping on your shoe would be insane, right? Like, or it would be crazy. So I think with bipolar, what you're seeing more so is that like unequal reaction. It does not match what just happened. Like if someone compliments you and you go off on them instead of, I could definitely see going off on them. Like, for example, if somebody compliments them but they take it wrong, they might just like have a crazy reaction, like just sort of be like super uncomfortable or like think the person is trying to get with them, but I see it bipolar more so being like explosive reactions that don't match what just happened, like really just way outlandish. Like someone might bump into them and they'll think the person is trying to like delete them, right, or whatever. Like it just doesn't match. The reaction is not equal. It's over exaggerated. Typically you react to things negatively no matter if someone is approaching you positively. I can see that as well. Definitely having overly negative reactions to people. All right, so I'm gonna stop sharing that, and I'm gonna try and put the PowerPoint over here because for some reason it's not showing up. For some reason it's not showing up on the other slide. So give me a minute, guys. But even though I know you probably didn't mean borderline, they're so starkly similar. Like when I'm doing the information on borderline bipolar disorder, you're literally gonna see how similar they are, right? Like even in the terminology it can get similar because people who with BPD are coming across like they're having these explosive emotional reactions. But what people don't realize with BPD a lot of time is that it was there was a trigger. There was something in the environment that caused that. I don't know why this isn't showing my slides. This is so weird. All right. Media. This is so strange. Okay, still doesn't excuse your response. Tiny just stop crying in the chat. Like some of you guys are just doing some weird stuff. Weird stuff. All right, let me put up. I don't know if this is it still not showing you guys my slides. Yeah, it's not showing you guys. This is so weird. All right, so anyways, I have a whole PowerPoint here, but for some reason it's not showing. So I'm going to see if I can put it on here and present it. Is it showing you guys that, or is it still not showing? See these new streaming apps. That's why people just stick with StreamYard because this should just be so different and so weird. Okay, all right, you guys should be able to see it now. All right, I don't know why for some reason it wasn't showing the presentation over there, but I'm gonna start with who has BPD, right? So BPD is a condition that usually the diagnosis is gonna happen in early adulthood or childhood. I see it on my screen now, so I hope you guys can see it. Someone said not showing. I think they were a little bit behind at that time. But it usually arises in adolescence or the sort of the early adult teenage years, right? At that point, there's still a lot of development happening. The person is still, the brain is still growing, things like that. So they try to give time for someone to reach those early 20s, like mid 20s, before they diagnose somebody. But these symptoms will come about very young. So someone could be a teenager, or they could even be a child when they start presenting some of at least the traits of a borderline person. So I'm going to pull up a story. This one's going to be about little Johnny. And let me do this. Is it showing you guys full screen? Okay, yeah, it is. So I'm supposed to be back here. Let me do this because we're going to see little Johnny. Little Johnny is sort of an example of what this might present as a child. Oh, sorry. Let me share the screen now. Sorry, I'm having like issues with this because it's not showing my PowerPoint when I just hit slides. But even though BPD is something that usually comes about in that late adolescence, adulthood, by the time it's diagnosed, you can start to see the issues arising when someone is a child. So I'm just going to give you guys a quick little story that sort of breaks down what this might look like as a child and sort of what ways those people are given to manage these things while a person's a child. All right, so let me.
Little Johnny was born with a sensitive brain that may cause him to develop borderline personality disorder. Here's what happens with Johnny. Little Johnny's mom says, "We're going to go over to your aunt's house so you can play with your cousin." Johnny's over there playing, and his cousin gets mad like 3 to 5-year-olds tend to do and says, "Johnny, you're not doing it right. You're so stupid." Johnny's really hurt. He runs over to his mother and says, "Mom, I want to go. I don't like it here. I hate it here." And she says what most moms say. "Hey, you're okay. Stop it. Just be nicer to him." That's what most parents do. They don't sit down and say, "I'd like to give you some alternative behaviors you could try with your cousin," even though that's exactly what Johnny needs. What most of us do is we calibrate our behaviors until the positive desired behavior is reinforced. We just start figuring it out. But a highly sensitive person can't do that. All they hear is, "I screwed up. I'm not doing it right. Now I really need to get out of here. I have my cousin and mom mad at me." So what does Johnny do? He throws his aunt's favorite vase on the ground.
So as you can see there, when it's a little child, the reactions that he's having to his family members, people that he's having maybe negative reactions, they're just outlandish, right? You don't start breaking vases and things because instead of affirming, you wanting to leave, your mom tells you to go and try to work it out with your sibling, right? So it's kind of illustrating the fault of the parenting style there, where there's a lot of dismissiveness. They're not able to sort of reinforce what behaviors need to be done, or even teach different behaviors that he can engage in, and just sort of acquiescing to what he wants in the moment, right? Johnny, unfortunately, he can't control that strong rage that he feels, right? So that's why he acts out by slamming down the vase or the flower there. And that behavior, that volatility sometimes is used as a way to control outcomes, right? So as a child, you're going to see this. It's going to be this struggle, this battle for getting through their emotional highs. So when they're super negative or super angry, they're expecting sort of like it to be eased by people doing what they want to. In that case, he wanted to go home. So he said, "You know what? I'm going to go smash this vase. And hopefully because I smashed the vase, now I get to go home." So it's kind of showing where those dysfunctional patterns and that volatility starts while they're young, right? In simple ways that they can be taught how to deal with their emotions, where the parent sort of lacks and is just very dismissive of what they're actually seeing and waits for that bad reaction before they, engage with the child there. So someone was asking if borderline is genetic. I don't know that you can necessarily say genetic, but there are genetic influences, and there are parenting style and trauma related reasons for it or causes for it as well. So I would say it's like a based on the nature and nurture argument where there's a little bit of both. All right, so let's continue and see obviously what the outcome is there.
Falls down and throws a fit. Mom says, Johnny, stop. Let's just stop. We'll go, okay? Now Johnny's learned that in a distressing situation, all he needs to do is break a vase and throw a fit to get his way. That behavior has just been reinforced. Now I want to talk about one more fun story by Marsha Linehan called The Rose in the Tulip Garden. There's an award-winning tulip gardener. He's won the county fair award for 22 years running. This guy knows his tulips. One day he comes out to his garden and he noticed a rose is growing and thinks, should I get rid of this rose? What should I do with it? And he decides, I know how to raise flowers. I'm an award-winning tulip gardener. So he begins to take care of the flower the same way he's been taking care of his tulips for years and years. But the rose dies because it needs to be taken care of differently than the tulips. People with borderline personality disorder are the rose. They just have a different set of needs than what normal parenting attends to. At New Roads, we offer evidence-based residential treatment programs designed.
So yeah, obviously there's a lot of different programs out there that attempt to treat these personality disorders because you can see eventually it's going to make for a very volatile child, right? A very volatile adolescent. They'll be dealing with sort of outbursts and things, and that can get kids in trouble in school, in their social environments, just hell, even right outside their own house. Being that way can certainly get them in trouble. All right, let us go back to the presentation, and I'm going to go into present mode. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about prevalence, because I think when we have these discussions, sometimes we don't factor in how often this really is out there. So even though we have some numbers here about how many people have BPD, it's said because of the type of disorder it is and the fact that people are not going to seek treatment is that these numbers are very very skewed due to that. So even though we have this 1.6% or this 6%, it's likely a lot more because people are going heavily undiagnosed. All right, so the median population prevalence of BPD is estimated to be around 1.6%. All right, but it's probably much higher due to underdiagnosis in primary care settings, right? So this means people going to their doctor and discussing their symptoms. They find that there's about a 10% diagnosis rate, or people who fall under that diagnosis. When people go to outpatient mental health facilities and other clinics like that, it shoots up to 20%. So again, even though it's said that 1.6% of the population is actually diagnosed with BPD, there is a much higher prevalence when we go out and evaluate different environments like people's main doctors. Is this showing as not on my channel? People's like primary care doctors, these outpatient facilities, which a lot of times you'll see when somebody has an episode or something that lands them in the hospital, 9 times out of 10, after their insurance runs out at the emergency room for whatever they ended up there for, you'll then see them being kind of placed in these outpatient programs. So they're allowed to be released from the hospital, but they have to engage in these programs where they go like part of the day, partial programs and things like that is what you see a lot around here. Other mental health clinics. And again, when you go into these settings, a bigger portion of those people are being diagnosed with BPD. So that sort of speaks to the fact that there's probably a much higher prevalence of BPD, but these people are one of the least likely to seek treatment for it. It's similar to NPD, as they're in the same cluster. All right. Tiny Joe said, this is the importance of talking through your child's feelings and help them with the options and how to handle different situations. I think that especially for kids who are sort of presenting with some of these borderline traits young or in adolescence, then that's specifically important, right? Because if not, then their issue with communication and feeling is just going to get worse as they become an adult. All those negative behaviors are going to continue to be basically not supported, but like reinforced. They're going to be taught that they do these extreme wild things in order to get the attention that it is the disorder the disordered mind is seeking. Right? Q-Kit Word said cousin should have been put in timeout for calling Johnny stupid. Definitely, but notice how the parental figure there was very. They weren't very they weren't very attached to the kid. They weren't really trying to feel out what it was that what was going on with them, or even how the other person was treating them. They're just so used to the kid always getting upset about certain behaviors and things that's what they do. They just wait until something blows up. So there's definitely a deficit. The video was meant to display a deficit in the parenting, but also a deficit in the child in being able to control those emotions. Empress says, I'm so glad I told my daughter to write down how she feels in her journal. Right, definitely. I think a journal is a great way to reflect, because a lot of times you can leave the journal, come back to it, and sort of be able to like look back at it like, oh, that's how I was feeling. That's what I was thinking. And sometimes the time in between reading and writing, you start to realize where maybe you've gone overboard, right? Or maybe this is a trigger that you didn't realize you had when you look over it. So I think journals are really good for self-reflection, teaching self-reflection, teaching awareness, and teaching like how to recognize your own emotions. My daughter and I have a communication journal. We talk about her feelings for that day in her journal. That's a nice way to communicate as well, especially not having to have like the open like in-person dialogue. Sometimes things will go a little deeper if you talk in that journal. So I've heard of that, but I've seen communication journals between like mentors, therapists, and things like that. So that's a pretty cool thing that you did for your daughter there. There's evidence that this prevalence may decrease in older age groups. So unlike the one we talked about yesterday, histrionic, this borderline, as somebody gets older, you're less likely to see some of the volatility in those such traits. As they get older, the symptoms might even decrease as well. Again, that's my source there. Let me go here really quick and exit. I'm going to pull up that article for you guys. Hold on. Share this tab instead. Oh, that's not what we were trying to look at. All right, so yes, this particular article talks about risk factors and early detection. So there's a lot of good information about like age and things like that, but it also has the diagnostic criteria. We're going to go over that later, so I'm not going to look at that too much. But even in terms of gender, like they pretty much found that there really isn't too big of a difference between men and women. It looks like there's a prevalence of 2.4 in women versus 2.4 in men versus women at a 3.05%. So it's a very, very small difference in between the two, but there is some difference. Lana says, yeah, parents have to regulate their children, and if it is family help, regulate the family as well. Yeah. It definitely is, and especially when you do have a child who has, some issues with emotional reactivity, or even just like soothing themselves and things. You have to help before they get older, and now they've built patterns of behavior that are destructive, that has turned into this. Because while they're young, children even, there's not likely to be a diagnosis of BPD, right? There's still a lot of growth that needs to happen. That person is still sort of in a phase where other things can be contributing to like the ups and downs of the emotions. So you won't see a diagnosis at that time. You usually see it as they get older and they're more developed, and sort of they have more of an awareness of the reactions and how imbalanced they are. Because at that point, they're still behaving that way. They can't control it. Younger, it's like, okay, there's other factors why. There's puberty. There's just so much more that could be going on there. All right, let me make this a little bit bigger. So again, they talk about here how BPD, just like many other disorders, it doesn't just pop up. It doesn't just pop up when they're adults. When they're young, when they're in the like early childhood or late childhood, you will start to see a lot of these traits pop up. Excuse me. In fact, predominant signs and symptoms can already be observed in younger age, especially during adolescence. So again, you're a teenager, probably more in school age, so having a lot of interactions with other kids, other personality types and stuff. That's where you'll see this sort of pop up and be kind of blaring right in your face. All right. And in the general population, cumulative prevalence rates of BPD in 16-year-olds and 22-year-olds are 1.4% and 3.2% respectively. So in between those sort of big age gaps there, you see it jump like double what it was when a person was a teenager. So at 16, you have like a 1% prevalence of BPD, but once you get to 2%, it bumps up, it doubles itself up to 3%. So there's some data there that would say that as they get a little bit further in adolescence up into young adulthood, that's when you're going to start to see the BPD sort of popping up there, being more pronounced. All right, let us go to the presentation. We'll share this tab and we'll put present. All right. Predisposition. So predisposition, again, we're talking about other things that can sort of lead to this, some of your genetic factors and things like that. We did speak a little bit about this, but unlike the other article, they found that in mental health settings, about 11% of the young people who were psychiatric patients were suffering from BPD, and 50% of psychiatric patients had BPD. So as you get a little bit older there, about 50% of the populations that are in inpatient psychiatric facilities, you're seeing borderline personality disorder traits, maybe a comorbidity with a substance use or something else. All right, so evidence shows that early borderline pathology before 19 years of age represents a predictor of long-term impairment in functioning and of longer duration of symptoms for as long as 20 years. So if you see a lot of these borderline traits before they're 19 years old, and that's a predictor of the fact that it might stay longer, right? It might become more malignant. I don't know if that's a good way of saying it, but they're more likely to develop into that borderline, and it's more likely to be disruptive in their lives over the course of 20 years versus somebody who, let's say it pops up in late adolescence and then they get treatment. They might have a shorter amount of time where they're suffering from those symptoms, maybe 10 years, maybe 6 years, right? So there's still a lot of time of symptomology, but those things can sort of be decreased depending on the type of treatment that they get early on for the symptoms when they pop up. And then Dr. Ramani is going to discuss the 6 causes of it. All right, so let me just pull that up for you. Give me 1 second.
I can't tell the broke boy. I can't tell the broke boy. I can't tell the broke boys. I can't tell the broke boy. I can't tell the broke boy. No. I can't tell the broke boy. I can't tell the. That nigga's crazy. Hopping in, bitch, and I saw it to be. Snakes in the grass, so they harder to see. My brother would give up his life to the O. He told me it go be a martyr for me. Said that she ready to corner the 6. I hit up Pauline and charter the P. Ain't really leave, but I'm back. I'm back. I'm back. I'm riding around in Atlanta with Sav, cause that nigga been going harder than me. Nothing to change, I'm just harder than me.
All right, let me
SUV. We ain't got a choice, we ordering these.
Cause
Noel for recording the V's. He know where they shit about to go. Cause nobody touching the flow. They say you alone at the top, but it's gotta be.
All right, so let's play this video. Dr. Ramani is going to talk about some causes of borderline personality disorder, and they are going to speak about some of the things that we spoke about in terms of like whether or not it's hereditary, genetic, whether it's something that happens environmentally through trauma or other experiences.
What causes borderline personality disorder? Here to answer that question is leading clinical psychologist, Dr. Ramani.
Everybody wants to know, with such complicated clinical condition like borderline personality disorder, how did this happen? That's always the million-dollar question with any mental illness, frankly. And if you look at the work of Dr. Marsha Linehan, who's done a lot of the research in this area, a lot of her work and other people's work highlights this idea that it's two things coming together: a biological vulnerability and coming from an invalidating early environment. So the biological vulnerability part, that part we're not entirely clear what that's about. Is it genetic? Is it a neurotransmitter issue?
All right, so just like we kind of read there, she stated, though there's a biological influence, it's not like, it isn't finite, right? Like, we're not 100% sure what biologically is predisposing that child to BPD. But like we saw in that video, the parent did absolutely invalidate the child, right? They came up to him and said, oh, we want to go, I hate it here, or whatever. The parent just assumed that it was just an overreaction by the child, when in fact she could have just went there and saw that the kid was being mean, right? We found out a little bit later they called him stupid, right? So that combination there is sort of what creates this borderline cocktail in the person, right? Where they're sort of exhibiting these behaviors that are a mixture of responding to the parenting that they received and some sort of genetic factor that influences their ability to be more short, to be more volatile and sort of angry and things like that. All right, let's keep going.
But something biologically about that person has resulted in them being more hyperreactive. They sort of overreact with emotion, with sadness, with anger. That couples with coming from an early environment, usually a family environment, that's very invalidating, where people are downright hostile, abusive, negating, critical, in a chronic way. Listen, no parent gets it right every time. This is the majority of the time. That environment is invalidating, and you can see how that becomes a setup for assuming that all environments are going to be invalidating. So there's this sort of hyper overreaction in the face of that. Now, where this work gets interesting is not everybody who comes from an invalidating environment develops borderline personality disorder.
That was my next question.
And not everyone who has that biological vulnerability develops borderline personality disorder. Obviously, if you have both, the probability goes way up. Now, an example of sort of the most extreme invalidating early environment is sexual abuse, childhood sexual abuse, right? That is an example where the child's trust is betrayed, they're confused, no one's keeping the child safe. However, the majority of people who experience childhood sexual abuse do not go on to develop borderline personality disorder, and a lot of people with borderline personality disorder did not experience sexual abuse as a child. So there's no absolutes here, and I think that frustrates people because everyone wants a slam dunk.
I was just about to say that.
Yeah, no.
I am frustrated just listening to that.
It is. So whenever we sort of uncoil or unspool the history of somebody with borderline personality disorder, we definitely see that something wasn't quite right in that early environment in most cases. But I gotta tell you, the longer I'm in this field, the more I hear tales of people who are borderline personalities adults. I've worked with the parents, and they'll say, listen, we have racked our brains. And this is multiple people. So it's not like one person could be deceiving and hiding this. And there's just no story there. There's no neglect, there's no abuse, there's no bullying, like there's no smoking gun. So it really then comes down to, in those cases, it probably was all biological vulnerability. The research right now is focusing on uncovering what that biological vulnerability is. Remember, as with all mental illnesses, the earlier we can intervene, the better the work we can do. So if we could identify some of these early soft signs, we might be able to work with people to give them better coping skills, particularly around managing emotion.
Yes, and that is a common thread with all of the mental health issues we've been talking about. Early intervention and intense intervention is the key to almost anything.
Especially, and we often miss these things in childhood. That's where it gets tricky. For a lot of people, these patterns were apparent even in late childhood, early adolescence, but nobody really jumped on it until they were well into adulthood.
Or they say, well, yeah, he's 16.
Yeah, 16,
so of course he'll
Right. So again, like many of the disorders that we're going to talk about in this cluster, I believe cluster B, the many disorders in this particular cluster, people don't seek as much treatment, right? We think it's normal for a teenager or a young person to behave in such a volatile way. Oh, they're 16. Oh, they're 18. Oh, they're 19. How now they're grown as hell and they still have those reactions, and we've just been swatting it away their whole life, right? So that's why a lot of times these things go undiagnosed and they go untreated because people are very dismissive of some of these symptoms. They might just attribute it to things that aren't necessarily normal.
Battles got power, Florabella stands tall. Every drip, every drop, watch the haters fall. Channel sharp as thorns, ain't taking no mess. Scroll through her feet, feel that queen's finesse. Vines tangle tight, but Flora breaks free. Roots so deep, can't mess with her tree. From the mud she rises, roses from the dirt. Every comment section she lays down hurt. Flora's anthem, blooming under pressure. Resilient, resolving, no lesser. Florabella's reign strong and relentless. Beauty in battle, queen sure defenseless. From the garden green to the concrete wall, Florabella, unstoppable nature's child. Leaves whisper secrets, she's the loudest shout. From the channel buzzing, she never backs out. Seed of strength, through seasons she grows. In the face of doubt, her spirit glows. Cameras ain't a limit, she branches out. Thorns in her crown.
All right, sorry about that, guys. Had to stop really quickly. Like I said, I'm bringing people to the airport. So, all right. So, where were we here? All right, I'm going to rewind it just a little bit. Oh, okay. So pretty much where we were at is that these diagnoses, these disorders go heavily undiagnosed. Again, people will attribute to these behaviors and sort of ways that they act and interact with people is like, oh, it's just normal for their age. But as they get further into development and these behaviors become patterns, now they've already reinforced a very negative way of interacting with people. So it sort of steamrolls. Obviously, there's no cure. Like someone was asking if this has a cure. There's no direct cure, but the earlier that somebody who's displaying these symptoms gets treatment, the more likely they are to have a less long of a length of symptoms. Like we saw one who's 20 years. That's a long time, right? Histrionic people with histrionic are histrionic well into their 70s, right? So it's a very long pattern of behavior. That's why I say, like, it's never too late to get treatment. Never. You can be 60 something, never too late, because it will shorten that amount of time that the person is suffering and they're harming other people, for whatever immediate reasons. He says, yeah, no one should dismiss a child, teen, or adult who has excessive anger issues or any emotional dysregulation without attending. All of it needs to be attended to. Even if you think, well, in terms of development, they're 18 or they're 15, let's say, because that's probably the most like, whew. But let's say the child's 15, they're on their menstrual. What you would think that is completely normal, but it's really not, right? Behaving that way, responding that way emotionally, it's not. Those people should be encouraged to seek treatment so that they don't become heavily dysregulated adults, and especially you're not going to have people in your life forever that are going to tolerate all these emotional outbursts, the just excessive responses to everything. It just would make a very hard life. That's why it's important, though you can't cure things, you start treating for them sooner than later. All right, let's continue. There's a couple minutes left in this video.
But nobody really jumped on it until they were well
or
into
they say,
adulthood.
well, yeah, he's 16.
Yeah, 16,
so of course he'll grow out of
true,
it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But if we don't know the biological component that could be causing this, the only way we're coming to that conclusion is by saying that everything else can't be the cause, so it must be a biological cause.
If there's no other historical kind of an issue that comes up. I mean, listen, we are born with a temperament.
Yeah.
Ask any parent out there, especially a parent who has multiple children, they'll say one kid was a really easy baby and they went on to become an easy grown-up, and they had that kid who was clenched up from the day they were born, and they were clenched up as adults. We do have temperaments, and there may be more vulnerable temperaments, which are believed to be biological in origin too. Until we can really unravel this, we're not going to know until, again, these behavioral patterns emerge. But what this also speaks to, though, is what we can do is hedge our bets. This means things like teaching people to parent, that sometimes under a lot of stress, parenting is hard. This is not meant at all to blame parents, but it's really about ensuring that we have supports in place for parents, whether that's daycare, whether that's parent training, whether that's pediatricians and other medical professionals that work with parents so they can be the best parent possible. We put a lot of pressure on parents as individuals when really as communities we could be drawing together and supporting parents, especially parents who are in more vulnerable situations, high stress, job insecurity, other mental health issues. We should be supporting parents because that allows them to support kids.
We put a lot of pressure on them and no tools.
And no tools.
So that's one of the reasons that I love what we're doing here, because parents or anybody can go to.
Right, so that's sort of the benefit of these conversations, even for myself, right? I might not be a clinician or anybody that can offer that type of treatment to you, but I can certainly point you in the right direction. And the point there is not to be blameful of parents or anything like that. It's to provide the extra resources that people need, right? They're going to need that extra intervention. Sometimes sometimes that can be like not medication. Well, maybe medication for mood. This is one where I would think maybe a mood stabilizer would, but I don't know what I'm talking about here. I'm not a medical professional, but I would see that maybe for some of those explosive emotions, there probably would be some medication management. I just don't know. I can't really tell you. But the point would be to encourage parents to seek help, right? You're not meant to do this alone. You have a child that reacts this way, it's very difficult for you. It can be very trying, right? You should definitely go out and seek the help, not just for the child in question, but for you as well, so that you can be the best parent, again, for this child, right? There's no cures, but there's definitely resources out there available for people to help manage these things, especially make it more tolerable. Like other disorders, BPD also has a high self-deletion rate. So this is seeking out that treatment is very important in this particular disorder as well. Let us go.
To medcircle.com, get on a free digest. It doesn't cost them any money, and start to get the lessons, the knowledge, the resource, the actionable steps to take to say, all right, maybe my kid's going through a phase, or maybe there's something more going on here, but either way, I'm going to do everything that I can to move forward.
Exactly. And the importance of creating very validating early environments for children at home, at school, that children need to hear day in and day out, you're okay. You're not just okay, you're terrific. Pay attention to them. However, you can do all of that. You can do all of that, and a person can still develop borderline personality disorder. So that's where this gets tricky.
And you know what? I also like to hear that, and I'm not 3 years old either. I like to hear I'm terrific too.
That's right.
So, I mean, that just it's there. It can be understated of being a good person. Be a good person. That will always help. Dr. Ramani, thank you for being here, talking about this fascinating topic. We'll have more videos from you, I'm sure of it.
Thank you.
Please talk to someone else, cause I can't talk to broke boy. I can't talk to broke boy. I can't talk to broke boys. I can't talk to broke boy. I can't talk to broke boy. No, no. I can't talk to broke boy. I can't talk to. That nigga's crazy. Hopping in, bitch, and I saw it to be. Snakes in the grass, so they harder to see. My brother would give up his life to the O. He told me it go be a martyr for me. Said that she
Oh, sorry. I got carried away. Can you guys hear me now? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Is there sound now? I should have unmuted, but I don't know if you guys can hear. If you can hear me, just please let me know in the chat. I believe you can. I believe you can, but if you can't hear me, just let me know. Can you guys hear me now? Oh, okay. Yes, you can. All right. See, you guys are busy, so don't let me get in your way. All right. So basically, it's a pervasive pattern of instability of interpersonal relationships. So, friends, people that you interact with, your own self-image. So it might be super confident one day, and then the next day, super like low self-esteem or feeling like down about themselves. They have change. They have instability of affect. So how they express emotions is unstable too. Like they might be super giddy and laughy, and then not be able to like even smile or fake a smile. That just there's a sort of extremes in how they express themselves. And it usually begins in early adulthood. We saw adolescents somewhere in there when they're past that 18 to early 20 mark. They're sort of more like a developed brain at that point. They're building their own personality or self-identity, I guess would be a good way to say it. That's when you start to see these dysfunctions in it. Right, so they have frantic efforts to avoid real or imagined abandonment. So they must always think people are trying to leave them, whether that's a relationship, friend. I don't even know. Maybe they think their job is constantly getting ready to fire them. And I'm not talking about when it's actually warranted. Like they might just have super irrational fear, right? They might be early to work all the time. Like perfectionists, and they're thinking they're gonna get fired every day. All right. Do not include self-deletion and self-mutilating behavior covered in criteria 5. Okay. A pattern of unstable and intense interpersonal relationships characterized by alternating between extremes of idealization and devaluation. So just like I think bipolar, there's like those extreme, they go from one extreme to the other. So they might be like ultra confident and then like shockingly like their self-esteem and self-worth is like shockingly low. It's like way on a different spectrum at that point, which that can cause major distress in a person. All right, they have identity disturbance, markedly and persistently unstable self-image or sense of self, impulsivity in at least two areas that are potentially self-damaging. So spending, intercourse, substance use, reckless driving, and binge eating. Right, so they might be super impulsive in one of those categories. Affect instability due to a marked reactivity mood, so intense episodic dysphoria, irritability, or anxiety, usually lasting a few hours and only rarely more than a few days. Recurrent self-deletion behavior, gestures or threats, or self-mutilating behaviors. I think a lot of that is referred more so to people who like dice themselves up. I don't know. That was a bad way to say it. I'm sorry. Dice was probably the absolute worst way to say it, but that's sort of what they're doing. They're like cutting themselves. That's a lot of what you see. Affect instability due to a marked reactivity emotion. Sorry, I read that already. Chronic feelings of emptiness, inappropriate, intense anger or difficulty controlling anger. So frequent displays of temper, constant anger, recurrent physical fights. Transient stress-related paranoid ideation or severe dissociative symptoms. That was a lot of medical jargon, but I'm sure a little bit sort of self-explanatory. I think transient just meaning like coming and going. All right, so that's the diagnostic criteria. Obviously, those are fairly intense types of behaviors that are happening in a person's life. And so the criteria is just to have maybe 4 to 5 of those. Oops. Oops. All right, so now we're going to talk about mirroring. So this is like a um, sort of a different part of BPD. It's not like a very big aspect of it, but it's one that's shared by people with narcissistic personality who are part of this cluster B of personality disorders. So hopefully you guys' heads aren't spinning from all the different definitions. Just try to look at these things in retrospect, like in reality, how people might be acting out in the world where you might consider it a borderline characteristic. But again, you're not a mental health professional either, so don't ever try to diagnose anybody or anything weird like that. All right, these are for information purposes and education purposes only. All right, so I'm gonna put that video.
Let's talk about this thing called mirroring. So let's start by asking or reflecting on, do you know why so many of you have fallen in love with narcissists or stayed in those relationships for such a long time?
All right, before you run away, just listen closely, all right? Because even though Dr. Ramani gives a lot of helpful information about narcissism, she also tries to teach people how to become more self-aware, right? So we're not just here crying about narcs, right? We're also learning how to not fall for the entrapment of narc, how to recognize a narc, and things like that.
Because you believe they loved you and saw you like nobody has ever seen you before. Why do you keep going back to the narcissist in your lives? Because at some point in time, it felt like they got you, or at the very least, they know what makes you tick, and they push at those pressure points. How were they so astute? How did they know how to get to you? Because they are the masters of mirroring. First of all, why do we look into mirrors? We look into mirrors to see ourselves. It's not something we could do without a mirror or a photograph. An accurate mirror reflects back our face and our body. We may not always like what we see, but a mirror is just that. It's merely a reflection. Psychological mirroring is a different game. When someone mirrors us, they are doing a range of things. They may mimic us, emulate us, be interested in us, share our interests, try to be like us, point out our strengths, gently point out our weaknesses, and simply reflect us back. Healthy mirroring involves a person who sees us accurately and who allows us to see them accurately. It is safe, it is reciprocal, it is honest, and it is kind. People can point out our flaws in compassionate ways, and having those sorts of holistic mirrors leave us feeling safe, no more than you'd want to look into an actual glass mirror and see a more distorted version of yourself that hides your physical imperfections. It may be nice for a moment, but then there is an emptiness and a wondering, what do I really look like? So let's talk about narcissistic mirroring, because that's a whole other game. Narcissists are masters at mirroring, and it can be really aggravating. It goes back to the point that obviously narcissists must have something in them that resembles empathy, because they are able to look out at themselves long enough to see our weaknesses and our sadnesses and our vulnerabilities and actually mirror them back to us. They had to be paying attention to get that, right? And if so, why aren't they paying attention anymore? The narcissistic mirroring process is less about seeing you in some meaningful way than it is about data gathering. The mirroring is often embedded in the love bombing process. They pay so much attention to you at that time that they are learning about you quite quickly. And many people succumb to love bombing and pull back on their boundaries and open up because it does feel so good to be mirrored. They are filing all of this information away, that sad stories of your past and the way you feel about your mother and your insecurities about how you look and your appearance. They remember it all. And down the road, when they need it, they will weaponize it. For example,
So she described that sort of perfectly, right? They are extremely manipulative. That's the characteristic of a narcissistic person. So when people ask like, how did you fall for a narc? I'm like, these people are masterful at being able to manipulate a crowd, a room, an environment, and a place of employment. It's just in them. It's innate in them to use those things as a manipulative fashion. So it's very easy for them to mirror people. They study people almost like homework, right? They do a very detailed job at picking up who you are, the things that are important to you. They're very focused. It's like a job, their destructive behavior is like a job. So they put a lot of effort into mirroring people and sort of showing people like, hey, I see you. I pay attention to what is important to you because I know I can use that for my benefit later, right? So it's a very, very manipulative part of their personality that people are very dismissive of when we talk about narcissistic personality. So yeah, they're going to be able to fool people, right? They're going to be so good at this data collection, right? Collecting all the parts of your personality of who you are, right? You're probably wondering, what is the point of them doing all of this? Well, the root cause, the root need for this is a need to validate themselves. And they're very driven to do that. They don't want to feel low self-esteem. They don't want to feel like those sad emotions that come with this. So of course, they're going to work really hard to get to know you so that you can continue to be a supply for them. Right? That's what it comes down to. It's just a manipulative behavior. The hoovering, the gathering of information, they will weaponize everything about you when giving a chance. Absolutely. And that's their whole process, right? The love bombing process is very detailed. To that extent, to the point that they're love bombing you, they have been very skillful at collecting data, right? Information about you that they can later use to keep you like looped into this web with them. So, when we're talking about manipulative people, of course, yes, they can very well and very easily persuade somebody. It feels really good, like she said, for somebody to see you or to feel like somebody sees you. And because they're mimicking that experience of seeing you, of feeling empathy, they're mimicking empathy for you, you actually feel like somebody is looking at you. Because there's positive forms of this sort of mirroring, right? When the people who love you mirror you, and they're also kind of like backing it up with true actions that are for your benefit, caring about you, that feels really good. And because they can really pretend to be somebody who cares about you, it's easy for people to feel validated by that and want that. They remember the day, the time, and whether temperature it was when you said it. Yeah, they're very skillful at reading people and collecting pieces about them so that they can continue this image. It's all of it is to affirm their own self, right? It has a lot to do with their low self-esteem. It has nothing to do with you. And that's the really hard part that's what makes it hard to recover. Everything that you thought was authentic, the love they had for you, when you realize the real, like where it's really coming from, what it's really motivated by, it's devastating. You're like, geez, this person faked love. Like they literally faked an entire romantic connection with you because you benefited them in some way. So, or in other ways like friendships. There's other types of narc relationships. We're not just talking about love, but I think that's what she's speaking about here in this mirroring segment.
in an argument, knowing how traumatic your relationship with your mother was, they will throw a zinger at you like, wow, now that you're mad at me, I can see you're actually just like your mother. And even as they say that, it cuts deep and they know it. Another common dynamic in mirroring is emulation, which can look like mimicking. This can happen in close relationships and it can happen in friendships, actually. The narcissist may actually start taking on your interests, like you do CrossFit, and now all of a sudden they are into CrossFit. A friend who is mirroring may modify her hairstyle to be a little bit more like yours, or someone might get a car like yours, or they may take a vacation to a place you are talking about. Now, this experience of emulation and mimicking can be both flattering and unsettling. While imitation may be the sincerest form of flattery, it can also feel a little bit creepy and stalky.
Sorry, guys, I was still muted. It definitely does, right? It starts to feel like that person is trying to take on you, right? It seems like they're trying to take a piece of you. That's what a narc, like after dealing with a narc, that's what you feel like. You feel like they've taken pieces of who you are, maybe your interests, maybe something you love to do. Now all you think about when you do it is the person in question, the one who mimicked and was imitating you. It leaves a nasty feeling on you. You want to take a bath after you see like what it was that they were actually intending to do. Kiki Star says, I've experienced this, and being young and arrogant, I took it as he's so obsessed with me, not realizing, yeah, exactly. And it's dangerous because being young, that is gonna be like an ego boost. Like you're gonna feel super flattered. You're gonna be like, oh yes, like that. Look, he's so like whatever. He's so into me that he's like showing me this beautiful empathy, but you're not realizing it's a game, right? It is definitely something that you can experience, especially young, in the puppy love, because people really just, they're not very, they call a lot of things puppy love that they might be very maladaptive relationship behaviors, right? They might not be cute. There's nothing cute about some of the attachedness that you see that people will, like shake it off and say that it's just part of being young and in love. There's actually a lot of red flags in some of those types of relationships. But let's continue.
And if you do try to call them out, they will often then project onto you that maybe you're jealous of them and accuse you of being selfish and wanting to keep them out of your life. Under those accusations, many people second guess themselves and just assume that the narcissist is so into you and so interested in you and so trying to get to know you that they just want to become a part of your life. And in fact, you may judge yourself negatively. Mirroring also means that they try to get to know every single detail of your life in excruciating detail. Your family, your history, your preferences, your habits. And again, for most people, this seems flattering, or it's just a classical part of getting acquainted with someone. And because we often feel in our world that people are so disconnected, many people may feel that this kind of inquisition is how it should be. The issue becomes how intensive it is. Many times people are quite private and have learned to set and hold boundaries.
So that's another thing, right? Because we sort of have evolved into this world that like very little effort is being put into dating relationships on both people's part, but we know where there seems to be a lot of lacking, right? Because of that, when a person is showing you this overly responsive attention, they're very fixated on you and the details of you, your life. You're flattered. You really think, wow, this is an amazing relationship. It's a whirlwind. It'll knock you, you got your head over your heels, right? But really, this is a very attached person, right? They're doing too much. There's something there that should cue to you that maybe the love isn't authentic, right? Or maybe it has, maybe there's bad reasons for it. So that's another reason why I think people fall for these types of people in relationships, because it's a lot of times it's super romantic. We're living in a very numb world. Like people just sit in front of TV screens or they're scrolling a big ass screen, right at home every day. So the little attention, the affection that you, or the empathy that you feel from interacting with someone like this might definitely make you feel like, oh wow, this is just another different kind of love, like a better special kind, like the best you ever felt. Like it just might feel like that. But let's continue. Oh, damn, what did I do? No, I was right here.
Become a part of your life. And in fact, you may judge yourself negatively. Mirroring also means that they try to get to know every single detail of your life in excruciating detail. Your family, your history, your preferences, your habits. And again, for most people, this seems flattering, or it's just a classical part of getting acquainted with someone. And because we often feel in our world that people
Excuse me.
are so disconnected, many people may feel that this kind of inquisition is how it should be. The issue becomes how intensive it is. Many times people are quite private and have learned to set and hold boundaries, and they may not want to push the fast forward button on getting to know someone, which is fine and it's totally appropriate. The challenge is that if you are not as forthcoming as the narcissist wants you to be, as into it as they am, as they are, as part of this mirroring process, they may be put off and start using gaslighting, guilting, and shaming as ways of coercing you into sort of this mirroring dance. Mirroring is initially flattering, and the fact is, if you do have
So, I think that probably explains why sometimes when you're getting to know somebody, and let's say you really like them, right? All the love bombing tactics of like wooing you and presenting the empathy perfectly to you, all of that is working, but somehow they feel like they're not getting enough out of you. So they start pressuring you, right? Like, why don't you want to open up more, right? Why don't you want to let me dig deeper inside of who you are, right? If you might have an instinct to pull back from them. This is where sometimes I see, or at least I think you see women speaking like about situations where they really, really like something, but they're getting a nodding feeling, right? Like it seems perfect. Everything is, they're dotting all their I's, crossing all their T's, but something at the root is still telling them like this, there's something off-putting about this. And that's that's that feeling, right? Even though it's perfect, you're probably seeing some narcissism, even though it feels very good, that is off-putting to you, but you can't really recognize. You really don't know why. So, of course, it's tough for us to go with the instinct there because everything else feels right besides that little one feeling, and people, they're most likely to get pulled into that.
good boundaries and good instincts, and you're willing to disengage when this mirroring experience almost feels overwhelming, and then you actually choose to not engage, the narcissist is actually going to get irritable and will often then move on to new supply. The problem arises when you don't detect it early, and the mirroring gets protracted over a much longer period of time, and you sort of get sucked in. Because then the mirroring becomes part of a larger process of manipulation and control. What becomes interesting is the day that the mirror goes from light to dark. Initially, narcissists are really great at mirroring back all the wonderful things about you. It's why the love bombing phase can be so seductive and be so powerful, because the mirroring is so powerful. And for the first time, many people get that sense of overwhelming and effusive praise for someone. They've never felt anything like it. There's an old African proverb that says, "Beware when a naked man offers you his shirt." The same kind of suspiciousness should be happening here. The narcissist lacks a strong sense of identity. They also lack a strong sense of security, so their mirroring is at best an empty process, I guess. One day, the mirroring does go to a dark mirror. They start reflecting back all the things that are wrong about you. Or now that they know what matters to you, they
Ooh.
will devalue the very.
All right, so that just gave me a little bit of the chills. I'm just gonna say, right? Because the dark mirror, right? That process, once you're dealing with a narc, where they become this negative reflection of you, like they're showing you that you're overly sensitive. They're showing you that that you're quick to think of the word, like just whatever it is that they're trying to manipulate with you. They're showing you, they're pretending basically in this gaslighting process that every reaction you have to them is a negative trait in you. So you really do, the devaluing is heavy right? Just as heavy as they can persuade you that they're in love, they can also very heavily try and persuade you that something's wrong with you, right? You're seeing it wrong. You have a problem, right? You're the one who is over analyzing the relationship. You're the one who is overdoing the response to whatever it is that you claim that they did. Like, they're basically just, the gaslighting goes, it happens at the same level as they love bombed you. So it's a very overwhelming process, because you're trying to deal with the fact that this person, they just swept you off your feet, right? They literally just knocked you off your heels, showing you this affection and this love and this I want you. And now, right, now that you're on the ground, they're kicking you, stomping you in the face. Right? They're saying, yeah, you're over exaggerative. You can't trust in a relationship. You don't want to let me take all your money. Like, it becomes, now they're mirroring to you. They're trying to show you bad things in you so that you feel the same way that you did, almost like when you were taking in the positivity from them. You're also taking in that negative, right? The belief that you're ugly, or you'll never find a man, or whatever it is they're trying to sell you that's bad about yourself. They ramp it up just like they ramped up that love that they tried to portray early in the relationship. So the intensity here with a narc, it stays throughout. Whether it's the love that they're showing you, super intense, the negativity, the hatred, the gaslighting, things like that they start doing. Now that they know you and start using against you, they ramp that up super quickly. And it is very overwhelming if you're dealing with them. So, they catch you off guard with like a nice hook to the face. Just the same way that they caught you with that love.
Things that matter. They start seeing you through a pathological lens. At one point, they wanted to go to church with you, and now they're diminishing your faith. And at this point, you think that you would run away because now it doesn't feel good. But you don't run away. Why is that? So here's the problem, especially during the dark mirroring phase. Mirroring works because, sadly, we sometimes agree with the distorted image that the narcissist sends back at us. Let's imagine that I look into the mirror. I'd expect to see black hair, brown eyes, brown skin. Now, if I looked into the mirror and I saw a person with a bald head or blonde hair or blue eyes, that would be deeply unsettling, because that's not what I look like. Now, psychological mirroring is quite similar. We expect to see the truth, but we see what we expect to see. And that's where the mirroring of a narcissist gets very dangerous. They mirror back what we think may be true. So many of you grew up in homes where you received distorted mirrors. You may have been ignored, which is a bit like having no mirror. You may have been criticized, like having one of those funhouse mirrors that distorts you and makes you look like you gained 200 pounds or 10 feet tall or something. You may have only been mirrored for certain parts of yourself, and that would be a little bit like looking into a mirror that only showed half of your face. We take these distorted mirroring experiences that we had as children, and we take them into our adulthoods. And as a result, sadly, we don't always run away when the mirror that another person places in front of us is distorted. You don't run away when the psychological mirror in front of you is cruel or invalidating or unkind, because after all, that's what the mirrors of the past showed you. Now, mirroring doesn't just happen in romantic or intimate relationships.
So again, I think that sort of speaks to like how traumas and things like that can impact our relationships, right? If we did deal with some of this invalidating, or like she said, distorted mirroring when we were young, we might be more likely to stay with a narc, right? Because we're used to that. We're used to being seen, portrayed in ways that maybe aren't really representative of who we are, right? It's just part of the trauma in their childhood, and how that impacts relationships. So not people who end up with narcissistic people sometimes have trauma that makes them more susceptible to staying with them, to allowing the abuse to continue.
Even though that's where it's most likely to happen, because you're meeting someone as an adult. It can absolutely happen in professional relationships. For example, a colleague or a manager or a mentor may engage in a mirroring experience that can leave you feeling like you're being seen for your professional prowess and ability and promise in a really unique manner. But just like in any intimate relationship, the mirroring may be a form of data gathering and control, figuring out your pressure points. And then that vulnerability can be used against you in the future. It may even keep you in a suboptimal work environment because you felt so heard at one time and so confused at other times. And because it doesn't have the same intense feeling as a romantic relationship, the workplace mirroring can be much more difficult to detect. One of the things that can be so aggravating about mirroring is that it does fly in the face of the narcissist's lack of empathy or limited empathy. Obviously, they do have the bandwidth to engage with your emotional world long enough to understand that they understand you and they get the intel and the data. So now they clearly have the capacity to attend to another person, but only if it fits their needs. And ultimately, selective empathy is really not empathy. So why do narcissists mirror? At one level, it gives them something to do in a relationship, and it likely gives them a feeling of control, which they are often lacking in their relationships, as well as a tool with which to potentially control you down the road. Now remember, because narcissists aren't wired for intimacy, it isn't about true closeness and connection. Rather, it's a bit of an imitation game, and it's one that can be really deceiving. At the end of the day, imitation is actually not necessarily the sincerest form of flattery. It may in fact be a red flag. And maybe flattery isn't a healthy place to start a relationship from anyhow. I mean, avoid that funhouse mirror that is the narcissistic relationship and focus instead on the accurate reflections that you get from your healthy relationships. It's interesting. We like to think that narcissists love looking in the mirror because they love seeing their reflection. What they're actually even better at is not just looking in the mirror themselves, but creating these twisted mirrors of other people. And in that way, they capitalize on our own vulnerabilities and all the sort of negative ways that we view ourselves. They keep putting back this mirror that's equal parts distortion and then the parts of us that they actually stopped and took the time to learn. Those confusing mirrors, equal parts distorted and accurate, are what can often drag us into these relationships, believing that we're understood and then wanting to fight so hard to make them understand the rest of us. The fact is, when somebody puts back something on us that is a distortion, it's on us to step away from that mirror. But that also means that we need to be more accurate mirrors of ourselves. Thanks again for tuning in. I hope this has clarified this concept of mirroring for you. And as always, I please invite you to hit the bell, subscribe to this channel.
Yeah, make sure you guys definitely subscribe to Dr. Ramani. She does a really good job of breaking down all this stuff. She is the narcissism expert. All right, so the next one we're going to do is actually from Lee Hammock. He is somebody who is he came out as a self-aware narcissist. I don't know if that's the best way of describing it, but he is someone who's diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder, and he's been in treatment for 7 years. I wouldn't say he's been in remission or anything of that sort, but he says or states that he has received enough treatment for him to understand and be able to explain to people what it's like and maybe how to avoid it. I don't know if that's the best way to say it, but let's listen to Lee.
So, let's talk about this thing called mirror.
Sorry guys, I just did, I'm trying to bring this video up. Just give me 1 second. Copy, put it in here.
So,
what the heck? Did I put it on there twice? Oh, I did. Sorry, guys. I'm going to have to search it up. Oh, you know what? I can go in my watch history. Well, actually, no. I'm going to do this. I'm going to show you guys this for a second. Do present full screen so that I can pull up the Lee Hammock video. I just had it up. It's only a couple minutes long. Just give me a second, guys. History. What's up, Giorgio? All right. I'm going to pull up that video really quick. It's not that far. Okay, here we go. All right, so let's share this tab instead. He gives incredibly good insight. I know, like, some people, don't like him. Some people think he's like full of it. It's just like about money and things. And even though obviously he profits from this, I think he does a really good job of breaking down a narcissistic person's mindsets and the way they think. I think he's very self-aware, like he says, because he's often very forward about how they think. He says that he used to be that way. He talks about stories of how he used to be. So I think he's a great resource in the subject of narcissism. So let me get to that. And hello, let's get into it.
What's going on, beautiful people? I am Lee Hammock, the diagnosed self-aware narcissist known as mental illness, and welcome to another episode of A Narcissist Explains, short edition, 5 minutes or less. You gotta stick around, y'all. Today's episode, we're gonna be talking about how narcissistic people study you and mirror you, how they act just like you, pick up your traits and things like that. You might be talking to a different version of yourself. Stay tuned, like and subscribe. So yes, narcissistic people study literally every single person around them. And if you're new here, I'm a narcissist. I have narcissistic personality disorder. So me personally, I study literally every single person around me, and I take on or emulate the personality traits of the person that I'm studying. The personality traits, the habits and things like that, I mirror my friends and coworkers and family members and people I see online just to, feel like a human being. I did that all the time growing up. So I say right now, the person you see right now is an accumulation of all the personality traits that I've saw in other people that I've either, admired or been jealous of. So I would add it to myself. I was like, damn, I like that about this person. So I would get around that person, study them, and take on their personality characteristic. And you'll notice a lot of narcissistic people will do this as well. They will mirror people around them, take on their personality traits, and start to act like their friends and family. They might even take your mannerisms and catchphrases. So welcome back. If you couldn't read the text on the screen, it says, my ex would always tell me I always study people. I thought that was weird. What the hell? Yeah. I'm just telling you straight up right now. Narcissistic people study you. They study people. They study everybody around them. That we study the environment. We study everything. Like I said in my short video, I'm just an accumulation of all the personality characteristics and traits that I've seen in other people that I've been jealous of, admired. I wanted it. I wanted to be like them, but I didn't want to be them. How my mind works. I think I can be a better version of them. If I take those personality traits and put them into me, I can become a better person, which would make.
See, that definitely gives some insight to like that grandiose, like I can be a better version of you than you, right? Because I don't really want to be you. You don't have all the characteristics I want. You have a particular thing that I want. You have a pizzazz to you that I find desirable, right? So it's very self-centered. It's still very in line with that egotistical mindset where it's like, okay, I can even play you better in your life, right? I can take you from a side character in your own life to a main character, right? If I take on your characteristics, just very egotistical, just sort of like I'm doing it for myself. So even though a person who's dealing with them probably thinks, oh, he's taking the time to get to know me, to know all these traits about me. But a lot of times, because they want those parts of you. They want to be as let's say, organized as you are or as ambitious as you are. They want to do the things that you do. Like, let's say that you're a podcaster and they want to become a better podcaster than you, like whatever the case may be. The reasons for them being so focused on people is for them to find ways to, affirm their own delusions and their own self-esteem. So it's even though it's very involved with people, it lacks like there's a lack of like connection there. It's very surface level. They don't really want to know those people because they like those characteristics in them. They like what it can do for their self-esteem. So it's a very like surface level way of getting to know somebody for your own benefit.
Me a better version of them because I'm different from them. That's just how my mind works, y'all. It's not me putting a slight on anybody. That's literally how my mind works, you know what I mean? But a lot of narcissistic people do that. That's why I say, especially in this age of online digital dating, long distance dating, online dating, and things like that. Look, you put everything that you want and need in a significant other in your bio. I want this. These are my likes, this. These are my dislikes, this, and that. And then you wonder why you get tricked and manipulated. Make people earn your information. Because if you do not, you're going to end up with a lot of narcissistic and toxic people that take advantage of you. Oh my goodness, you're just like me. I've never met anybody that likes this and likes that. How would you know? You put it online. You put it online. You did. You put it online, and they mirrored it. They studied it like a test. They studied it like a science test. They crammed in information. They're probably on the way to the first date, reading up about you. You don't like this.
So I think what he's speaking to there too is how technology sort of has made it very easy to use our information against us, right? Companies use our information to figure out what kinds of things to market to us, sell to us, right? That's a form of manipulation. It benefits the economy or, people here trying to sell things. In the same way, you putting all these things on your profiles or your social medias about what you like and love, how people can use that in a very like one-dimensional way, right? Like between you and them, they can use that to manipulate you, to get information about you, to study you in a way that will make you feel like they want to be with you, right? So it's literally a tactic that the internet has inflated, has made it very easy. Before, somebody would have to talk to you. Right? They would have to meet you in person. They would probably have to know a lot of the friends that you have back in the day. That's how it was. But technology made it so that any person anywhere can learn you, can study you, right? And that could be part of the reason why we have interpersonal struggles, because people are, they're turning to other people's social media to get to know them rather than trying to observe a person, right in front of them.
Got you. And they get you. They get you like that. They love bomb you with the stuff that you put online or the stuff that you tell them you like. Surprise. Like when they give you things you like. Surprise. Make people earn your information. They just do. Make people earn it. Oh my goodness. And if they lie to you up front, they'll lie to you later on, y'all. They are studying you. Typically, a narcissistic person will mirror you and you end up falling in love with yourself. You just do. You fall in love with a different version of yourself, maybe in the opposite sex or the same sex, whatever. You mean? So take your time, make people earn your information. I hope this video helps you and changes your.
I think the way he breaks it down there is pretty good too, right? Because it is kind of spooky, right? You're falling in love with yourself. The mirroring that they're doing is just kind of showing you things about yourself that you like, right? That they're able to mimic. So it is I like the way he explains that. It gives you another way of looking at it. But okay, so let's go here. So now we're going to read a little bit of the research about this. So I'm going to open the first article. And it talks about the way that narcissistic people mirror. Actually, you know what? We talked a lot about mirroring. Let's skip that. And I'm going to go to the last couple of visual representations of some of these characteristics of borderline personality. Because I got to run soon. It's 4:50. I got to go to the airport in like an hour. So let me put the next video, and I believe this is a case story. Now, if you guys go on YouTube, there's a lot of there's a lot of these different interviews. Like before, when I was looking at some of these live interviews that they do of people with like common disorders, I was looking at a lot of them that were autism and things like that. I believe I shared some a while back of an autistic woman with autism who was like diagnosed like very late in life, and she talked about the things that she went through, like her struggles and some of the things that she did as a way of coping. As a way of coping with the symptoms that she experienced and people's reactions to her. So let me play this one. This one is a high functioning person diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. She's actually a physician and she's looking to become a psychiatrist. So even though people like to be silly and be like, oh, you talking about this subject because you're the crazy one, you the crazy one. Well, people with mental disorders can go on to become physicians. They can work in any field just like any other person. They just have to seek treatment. So their life doesn't have to be characterized by dysfunction and inability to at all succeed in the things that they're trying to. It's not just chaos. If people who have borderline personality disorder get treatment, they can function. And this just happens to be someone who's already high functioning with a disorder.
Okay, so I guess where we should start is you reached out to me and I was like intrigued. Why don't you talk about how we connected and why you decided to reach out?
Well, first of all, I'm Tiffany, and when I reached out, I believe I was an addiction psychiatry fellow, but now I'm a public psychiatry fellow. So essentially I'm in mental health. And that is kind of relevant just because mental health is like my passion. Not only do I have my own mental health issues in my personal life, but just in my work life, it's something that I feel is still stigmatized in this country, still not, treated the way that it should be treated. I went to residency in Louisiana, and for my fellowships, I moved to California. There was a lot of loneliness and the pandemic and just a lot of factors that went into my mental health declining. I always knew that I had depression and anxiety, for which I was treated and put on medication. I was using all of these skills in regards to cognitive behavioral therapy and trying to reframe things. And despite the fact that I was taking my medication, and despite the fact that, this is just my life in dealing with other people's mental health and trying to incorporate, basically, I'm giving a really, really long story to say that I was not doing well. And so I stumbled upon Borderliner Notes, and I saw Charlotte, and that was one of the things that really, really changed my life. And I know that sounds dramatic, but it's not, because when Charlotte was talking, it was one of the first times where I was just like, that's me. That's me. She gets it. She understands it. She gets it. And
can I ask you one?
Oh yeah, sure.
What was it about? What part of it felt to you like that?
Okay, so they're doing some advertising. So I just wanted to give you guys a little bit of examples of people with this. So it looks like that's some type of program, and she's doing a whatchamacallit, a what's-a-whoosy. She's doing a testimonial. So let me put another one here. But yes, there's a lot of people who are high functioning with these disorders, and because of their high function, they don't get the treatment that they need. So I'm gonna put the next one because I got bamboozled by that one. We're gonna talk about
Hello, my name is Carl. I'm 25 years old and I suffer from BPD. I was diagnosed in August 2016, and then I gone through dialectical behavior therapy.
So, as you can see here in borderline, the way to treat it with this dialectical behavior is offering new ways to deal with the pain that they feel, the anger, whatever the emotions and things, whatever ways that they can decrease conflict. They're given new tools of dealing with that. So instead of blowing up or stalking somebody, maybe they can, change that behavior into like doing art or getting involved in some type of mindfulness activity that will help them veer away from those extreme emotions. So a lot of people with these disorders benefit from dialectical behavior therapy because they have to find new ways to deal with their explosive behaviors, right? So if they get rageful and they start antagonizing people, they're given a new behavior or a new action that they can do instead of antagonizing someone that can help ease that rage. Maybe it's maybe there's and I like to think that getting involved in physical activities and things like that can help you specifically get away from uncomfortable emotions. So you see people who get angry a lot, they do well in like a kickboxing or a martial arts or self-defense. It helps them hone those feelings of rage, of volatility in a different way, right? Because being volatile on a mat or with a little speed bag, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Right, you have a place to put the volatility that isn't going to hurt anybody else, and it's not going to hurt yourself. It's not going to cause dysfunction and disarray in your relationships with people either. So it's all about changing the way people react. You can't really stop somebody from becoming feeling like they want to get vengeance, feeling this rage, feeling the hostility. You can't stop them from feeling that, but you can stop how they respond, right? Instead of being hostile and going and destroying things, they can be hostile and go to like one of those smash rooms, right? So when somebody pisses them off, they go and sign up to get in the smash room, and now they're just smashing things all over the place. And when they get out of there, they feel better. So it's about replacing those negative behaviors or reactions that they have to the feelings that aren't going to disappear, right? There's no pill that's going to stop them from feeling like they want to antagonize somebody. There's just other things that they can do. Through mindfulness, right, distress tolerance, emotional regulation, and interpersonal effectiveness. That's where they want to be. They want to be able to regulate themselves. They want to find healthier outlets for their negative emotions, because you're never going to stop feeling negative emotions. But you don't have to allow those feelings to control the outcomes that you have in your relationships, in business, education, things like that. So let's continue on to Carl's story.
And it lasted for about 3 months, where each week I would have one individual and one group therapy. According to my doctors, I was officially diagnosed as a teenager, but I've shown symptoms as a child. So being as a 25-year-old, that's a long time of suffering and living with BPD. So to begin with, I'll start with the major symptoms. The first one would be emotional instability. So the best way I like to explain emotional instability is, imagine our basic emotions. There's happiness, anger, and sadness. I've never been happy, I've always been ecstatic. I've never been sad, I've always been depressed. And I've never been angry, I've always been furious. So imagine these intense emotions and imagine them happening within 5 minutes. And also the fact that these emotions can be triggered by anything. The wind blows the wrong way, I can drop my pencil, they can have a scuff mark on my glasses, I can be angry, furious, and just feel all these emotions very intensely. One of the main things that I've suffered from was anger. I was always angry. I was angry at everyone, anything, for no reason at all. Something that we borderliners have is this thing called borderline rage. What borderline rage is, do you know the expression, the lights are on but no one's home? That's really what borderline rage really is. It's just a rage that just consumes me, and
when he breaks it down like that, it does sound really scary, right? Like you don't know the origin of the anger. You can't stop it. You can't limit it. You just have to feel it, right? So it's very intense in nature. It has that similarity to bipolar where it's just a lot of it. You can't control it. It just consumes you, right? Like all you feel is anger. You don't know why. You can't stop it. So it can probably be very frustrating for people suffering from this.
I have no control and no consciousness of what really is happening. I would do things and say things out of pure rage. And 2 seconds later, I'd be perfectly normal, as if nothing happened. I'd be smiling, I'd be hugging you. It was just really hard to control my emotions. It's just something that had really control over my life and my body. Another thing I struggled with was a fear of abandonment. And this one is another major one for borderliners. So what fear of abandonment is that anything that happens to me or with anyone, I can perceive as abandonment. You go to the bathroom, I feel abandoned. You can text while I'm with you, I feel abandoned. You don't look at me in the eyes, I feel abandoned. No matter what rationale or logic I put into it, for me it was just always abandonment. And I was always lonely at this point. Like I had no one because I was afraid of people just leaving me. I would do things to keep people. I would say things. I would do anything to keep people. Because at the end of the day, who wants to be without friends? I know I didn't. So another thing I struggled with was also a sense of identity. I had trouble fitting in and being someone. I had trouble making friends and I had trouble keeping friends. It wasn't because I didn't know how to socialize. I could socialize. I can be very confident. I had very high self-esteem. The problem was I couldn't identify with anything or anyone. I was essentially a chameleon. I would shift my identity based on what people liked, what people hated.
Oof. Now listen, I know you guys have run into people where you're like, Jesus, it seems like depending on who they're around, they can be anybody, right? Like, Jesus, so fake. And it's easy to look at people like that and be like critical of them, like, oh, you're just acting that way, you're just speaking that way, you're just behaving that way because you're trying to fit in with that person. You're trying to take that characteristic and like mirror it, right? Similar to the narc. And it is very sad, Lana Love, because this person is always, there's never comfort in who they are and what they're presenting. They're always trying to be something else. They're always seeking out an identity, and it probably makes them feel really unstable. Robin says he is literally explaining people in his space. Absolutely. And I think when you are in a space like this where there's like different outlets, and you have the ability to sort of reach an audience and things, you're going to start seeing a lot of different types of people. And I think this is what you see of some people on here. They go from channel to channel to channel, taking little pieces of everybody, right? They're making up this image of themselves that is coming from bits and pieces that they like from other people. So they can be narc. They can be narcissistic, which is what you hear most of us talking about. But they could also have borderline traits, borderline personality, right? They have that lack of self-image and identity and self-worth. They don't really know who they are. And so they have to take pieces of everybody else to feel whole, right? And that can be a frustrating person to deal with too. I've literally seen that in these chats, people switching up depending on who they are around. Yeah, that's a borderline trait, right? And it's funny. That's why a lot of people will say mean things like, oh, the internet is full of mentally ill people. But if you think about the reasons why people gravitate towards certain environments, that should tell you something. Right, that should sort of explain to you there that a lot of times people who are online, they're looking to get something out of their interactions with people. For some people, it's finally getting an identity or taking a favorable trait from somebody that maybe they admire or that they're at least seeing online. So I agree with that. People lying to avoid being questioned about stuff. A lot of people are weak and feeble-minded. The sad thing is, we can't just call it weak, because then people aren't gonna seek out the treatment that they truly need, right? I think people are unwell, right? They go through certain things. They have genetic predispositions that they're not really aware about. Some people are comfortable in their degeneracy, right? They've been behaving this way for so long, and maybe they've been being rewarded by it. So why would they even change, right? People with this disorder a lot of times are not likely to seek treatment because they're usually benefiting from a lot of these negative behaviors, right? Just like the histrionic person is benefiting from their obsession with how they look, the borderline person might be benefiting from the different traits that they're getting from people, right? Maybe they're so good at mirroring that they can convince people that they're this empathetic figure that is just well-spoken, or whatever trait it is that they're trying to take from somebody. They're so good at mirroring it out to people that they benefit from it. And a lot of people will benefit from copying others and building an image based off of that. So it's, I think part of it is just some people feel like they don't need treatment. They don't see anything wrong with what they're doing, especially if there's a lot of dummies behind them, like reinforcing their behavior by giving them like praise, maybe giving them stimuli, funds, money, whatever it is. That might make them think that what they're doing is good, even though it's a maladaptive behavior. So, all right, let's continue. Carl is doing a really good job at explaining it. You can tell he's nervous, but you can also tell has become very introspective.
Even music, I would shift depending on what people liked or what people thought was cool, just so I would fit in. It got so bad that I had no perception of who I was, that one time I developed anorexia and bulimia so I can be thin and fit in with more people. But obviously that backfired because that's not something that's healthy. So pretty much those three things: the fear of abandonment, emotional instability, and the instability of my identity. Those are the three major symptoms that I've suffered for a very long time. And it was very hard to live like that, honestly. Especially being in a society that sort of disregards or ignores the whole issue of mental health, and especially being a male with a mental illness that revolves around being emotional. I was called weak, I was called a girl, I was called names that I just...
Listen, he's speaking of fact, especially when it comes to this disorder in men, right? This disorder might be clear as day in the man, but because of a lot of this stigma, it goes majorly undiagnosed, right? Practitioners might even practice that bias against men and diagnosing them properly for what they're experiencing, so I definitely feel him on that. Robin says, yep, a lot of people are searching for their identity in this space, in many spaces, online even, because like you talked about, a lot of people put themselves and who they are out there online. And so they do leave that open for those who are searching and who come to the internet for some of that stuff. It leaves a place for those people to maybe latch on to them or parts of themselves. So, I definitely understand that. 1 minute they fake claim they're classy and don't argue. The next minute they have manic episodes. Let me just tell you. And this is a big one because I'm sick and tired of people just acting like when you're pissed off about somebody saying something stupid in a goddamn argument that you're not just going to cuss them out. All right. I hate that. Sometimes you'll be listening to somebody speaking. You're like, that's some stupid ass shit. And you might usually be very well spoken. You might have a baseline, a good temperament when it comes to having discussions, but something just was so outlandish. Some things are just, you got to put your foot down sometimes. Sometimes things that people say is just so ridiculous, especially in this space, that you just like, ugh, I can't. No, you're stupid, right? You come out your body. It happens to everybody, right? That's as long as that's not how you deal with people every day. If sometimes you hear some stupid shit online and it makes you mad and you're like, F this, then it is what it is, right? Instead of trying to make it a gender thing or something, if people would just be who they are, we wouldn't have any problem. Listen, I'm just saying. Exactly. It's like one day they're this is what I said, is one day is Mother Teresa, the next day they are Slim Shady. Like, I'm gonna just leave it at that. All right. So that's Carl. All right. I'm gonna put the next example on here.
Welcome to my Scientifically Informed.
And this is actually a way that a person with this personality disorder can actually become dangerous, right? So now you guys know the name of my series is called The Dangers of Delusion. That was a name that I gave out there to sort of give us a different light on how we look at some of these things, right? People with mental disorders like this, they're not just automatically dangerous people, but absolutely the things that they suffer from can cause them to engage in dangerous patterns of behavior. They can become volatile to other people, and they can have what we call fatal attraction syndrome. All right. So for ICU, okay, for whoever this applies to, don't come in here crying, saying that I'm coming at you. Just pay attention. Hey, Miss Jalen. Tiny Joe says, so true, on a soapbox, championing against certain behaviors but supporting heavily people doing those same behaviors, such hypocrites. Again, so if the shoe fits, then wear it. All right, that's not my problem. So we're going to talk about fatal attraction syndrome, and this is something that we can sort of see in borderline personality disorder and those who engage in stalking. All right.
Insider look at mental health topics. If you find this video to be interesting or helpful, please like it and subscribe to my channel.
Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today's question asks, what is borderline stalking? So I've seen this question a few times in kind of related questions. Another related question here would be, what is fatal attraction syndrome? Which of course isn't a real syndrome, it's just a term people use sometimes to really refer to the stalking behavior that we sometimes see with borderline personality disorder. The reason we see the term fatal attraction in there is because of a 1987 movie by the same name with Michael Douglas and Glenn Close. So this movie portrayed behavior that could be attributed to borderline personality disorder, and we've seen other movies that kind of follow the same pattern. So really what this question is getting at is, what is the relationship between borderline personality disorder and stalking? And I think when we think of borderline personality disorder, people think of the frantic efforts to avoid abandonment and kind of connect that to stalking. So first I'll start with a definition of stalking. With stalking, we see an offender who exhibits chronic nuisance behaviors that result in deleterious emotional or physical effects on a victim. And it's believed to come from an illogical or irrational fascination or preoccupation with an individual, and sometimes it can rise to the level of psychosis. So there can be reality testing problems involved with stalking. Now, sometimes in the research literature, we see another term used instead of stalking called unwanted pursuit behavior. And this is similar. There's a lot of overlap with stalking, but usually unwanted pursuit behavior is thought of as more widespread and less severe as compared to stalking. Also, stalking does not necessarily result from an intimacy motive, and it's always illegal. Unwanted pursuit behavior doesn't necessarily cause fear or threaten the victim, and it's not always illegal.
All right, so they made a pretty good and important distinction there, right? Because this unwanted pursuit, like being after people, trying to get people to engage with you, it isn't illegal, right? Someone can consistently egg you on and try to get you to talk to them in a weird way, right? Like you don't want to interact with them, you don't want to talk to them, you don't care who they are, but they're still kind of pushing for that connection. They're pushing for you guys to still engage with each other, right? I think that's sort of the behavior here that he's describing, that unwanted pursuit. Maybe it's somebody you don't care for. Maybe you've had bad interactions with them in the past, and so you're trying to stay away. But those people, they might continuously try to engage you, right? And this is something, again, like he's saying, because I believe with him, he's actually a practitioner. Hold on, I gotta see really quick. Yeah, he's a doctor, and he specifically is talking about
one way we could think about.
Excuse me. He's talking about traits that are expressed in people with borderline. So this is a way somebody with a borderline personality disorder might engage with somebody that is, it might come across, this will make somebody uncomfortable, even if they are, it's just a behavior they can't control. It is a way of taunting somebody. So it might not be illegal, but it still causes significant discomfort in the person that they are sort of trying to get to re-engage with them. So
unwanted pursuit behavior and its relationship to stalking could be unwanted pursuit behavior, again, like I said, isn't necessarily illegal, but if it occurs for too long a period of time, it could rise to the level of stalking. So one tactic, as they're called, with unwanted pursuit behavior may not be illegal, may not even be abnormal, but if it continues for a while, then we might have stalking. So we see in the media that the stereotype of a stalker involves a stranger who stalks a celebrity. But what we see in reality is relational stalking, not stranger stalking, is the most prototypical form of stalking behavior. 80% of all stalking cases involve victims and perpetrators who had some type of prior relationship, and in half of all stalking scenarios, we see the individuals had a prior romantic relationship. Now, some of the descriptive statistics around stalking are really ranges rather than precise numbers, because we see a lot of different studies on this topic and a lot of variation in terms of the results. For example, around 8 to 25% of women will be a victim of stalking at some point in their lives, and about 2 to 11% of men will be victims at some point in their lives. Now, with unwanted pursuit behavior, we see that 37% of ex-partners exhibit at least one of these tactics after a failed relationship. So unwanted pursuit behavior is remarkably common compared to stalking. Also, we see a number of benign tactics.
All right, so this is for the people, and that I think is very important, because there's a lot of people who will try to gaslight people about these behaviors. They'll be like, oh, well, that's not illegal. This is not stalking. This is not. But really, even though it's not illegal, it is still a very off-putting behavior. It can severely impact the person that they're dealing with. And just because really a technicality in the definition is the only reason why people sometimes won't consider it to be a stalking behavior, they're still constantly trying to engage with you when it's not wanted. So it's like the line between stalking criminally and just sort of constantly engaging with someone who doesn't want to talk to you is very thin. And a lot of people toe that line. A lot of people cross into criminal stalking, but people are so over it. They're more likely to adjust their behavior for the stalking to continue than to believe that talking to law enforcement or something will actually fix the issue. So I like that he makes that distinction there. And this is going to be my last video, by the way, guys, because I have to go. I'm going to be leaving in like 40 minutes. So
associated with unwanted pursuit behavior, like watching or monitoring or making exaggerated expressions of affection. With stalking, we see behaviors that are often considered more serious, as indicated before. And if we look at the behaviors in terms of which ones are most common to which ones are least common, with stalking, we see unwanted telephone calls and messages are the most common. And then moving down the list, we see unwanted letters, someone who spreads rumors about an ex-partner. We see someone who is being followed or spied on. We see a victim being unexpectedly confronted by a perpetrator or being waited for. And then the least common would be to receive unwanted presents. So what does all this have to do with borderline personality disorder? I covered a lot of the aspects of stalking and unwanted pursuit behavior. Well, if we look at borderline personality disorder, we know it is a mental disorder in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, specifically a cluster B personality disorder. So it's a personality disorder in the same group as antisocial, narcissistic, and histrionic personality disorders. With borderline personality disorder, we see 9 symptom criteria. Somebody would have to have 5 criteria in order to be diagnosed with a disorder. So we see frantic efforts to avoid abandonment, an unstable relationship pattern, identity disturbance, so difficulty with self-image, impulsivity in at least 2 areas that would be self-damaging, suicidal behavior, affective instability, which is emotional dysregulation, when somebody has difficulty kind of keeping their emotions in check. We see chronic feelings of emptiness, inappropriate or intense anger or difficulty controlling anger, and we also see paranoid ideation or severe dissociation. So as you can see, some of those symptom criteria seem to line up with the behaviors of stalking and unwanted pursuit behavior fairly well. The frantic efforts to avoid abandonment, the anger, the impulsivity, the emotional dysregulation, the unstable relationship pattern, and maybe even in some instances the paranoid ideation and the chronic feelings of emptiness, because chronic feelings of emptiness might be related to rumination, and that's tied to stalking behavior. So one way to examine the relationship between borderline personality disorder and stalking would be to look at a group of people who have admitted to stalking or who have been convicted of stalking and seeing how many of those have borderline personality disorder. The difficulty with this is we don't have a lot of research in this area, although we do see some studies that cover this. And really this can be broken down into two different groups. So with one of these groups, we see that for people who demonstrate stalking behavior that have not been charged with a crime. So these are people who admit to it, but again, there's no criminal justice involvement. We see that borderline personality disorder may be present up to 45% of the time. So in 45% of those people, they may have a disorder. Now, for people in the criminal justice system, the prevalence drops to somewhere between.
Sorry, guys, I was like bouncing around the room and I heard that part there. So let me just rewind it really quickly, because he literally said there that people will admit that they're engaging in stalking behaviors, but there's no convictions, there's no criminal aspect to it. But hold on.
Emotional dysregulation, the unstable relationship pattern, and maybe even in some instances the paranoid ideation and the chronic feelings of emptiness, because chronic feelings of emptiness might be related to rumination, and that's tied to stalking behavior. So one way to examine the relationship between borderline personality disorder and stalking would be to look at a group of people who have admitted to stalking or who have been convicted of stalking and seeing how many of those have borderline personality disorder.
So people like to say, right, that these things are not that significant, not that many people have these traits or behave this way. But of the people convicted, for 45% of them to have borderline personality disorder, have borderline traits, that's pretty significant, right? And obviously when a person gets to the point of criminality, the treatment is no longer going to be the main focus, right? That person's the main focus that person is dealing with, unfortunately, is the consequences of their criminal actions. But there is a underlying condition there. There is a borderline. Likely they probably meet the criteria for the disorder if they were to be diagnosed by somebody. But that's sort of what is sort of what's the crazy part here is that all the data there pretty much points to that most people are, or not most people, but a lot of people are walking around undiagnosed, and they're suffering consequences that they might have avoided if they would have sought treatment sooner than the criminality came up.
The difficulty with this is we don't have a lot of research in this area, although we do see some studies that cover this. And really this can be broken down into two different groups. So with one of these groups, we see that for people who demonstrate stalking behavior that have not been charged with a crime. So these are people who admit to it, but again, there's no criminal justice involvement. We see that borderline personality disorder may be present up to 45% of the time. So in 45% of those people, they may have the disorder. Now, for people in the criminal justice system, the prevalence drops to somewhere between 4 and 15%. So fewer people in the criminal justice system for stalking would have borderline personality disorder. Now this seems kind of unusual. There's no real quick or easy explanation for this. But one theory is that perhaps in those settings, in criminal settings, there are other explanations for a number of those stalking behaviors, including other mental disorders like schizophrenia. So we
Sorry. So I did look it up. He was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder and schizotypal disorder. Schizotypal disorder. Sorry. So he was a diagnosed borderline person. I wonder if that was he's such a vile person. I don't want to say any words like to describe what he did, but he like kept pieces of the people he liked. So I wonder if that was like a over like antisocial, like very, very distorted way of connecting to people. Because they did talk about how he ate I don't want to say it, but he obviously digested some people and kept parts of them. So it's like, I wonder if that was just a very, I don't know. Just, yeah, he could have definitely, he probably did have borderline, and the way he did things is sort of, it could have been a factor of it could have came from the schizotypal. To have that combination of disorders is tricky and disturbing.
We don't really know, so this gives us a range all the way from 4%, as I mentioned, up to 45%. Now, to make this a little bit more confusing, as we move away from examining criminal and non-criminal, we see other studies that show that with stalking behavior, about 50% of the individuals who demonstrated that behavior would have a cluster B personality disorder. Now, that may be borderline personality disorder, but it may not be, because again, there are 3 other personality disorders in cluster B. But we do know from this research that even in instances where there was another personality disorder other than borderline personality disorder present, the borderline personality traits are often at a high level. So what this means is that everything is really on a continuum. So there are 9 symptom criteria for borderline personality disorder, but somebody could meet a few of those criteria and not have the disorder, but they may still have borderline personality traits or characteristics. So this kind of gives us a measure on a continuum as opposed to categorical, and it can give us more insight into stalking behavior and what may be connected to it. So borderline personality as a construct does seem to have a fairly strong relationship to stalking. Now, some people really struggle with the idea that individuals with borderline personality disorder might be more likely to engage in stalking behavior. And I think one of these reasons is because a lot of people think of stalkers as being primarily men. Now, we do know in about 75% of the cases of stalking, the scenario breaks down where the man is the perpetrator and there's a woman who's a victim. So this explains, again, the majority of cases, but that leaves a lot of other room for other types of scenarios, including scenarios where the female could be the stalker. Now, when we look to specifically unwanted pursuit behavior, which again is related but it's not the same thing as stalking, we see that research indicates that men and women perpetrate an equal number of tactics over a similar time span. Now, the methods are a little bit different. So men stalk in a different way as opposed to women. We see men are more likely to leave unwanted gifts and messages of affection, and women are more likely to be physically violent toward their ex-partner. So the number of tactics is the same, but again, the expression is a little different. The type of tactics are a little bit different. Another way to look at the relationship between borderline and stalking would be to look at the risk factors and see if any of them seem to be tied to borderline personality disorder. Well, there are a number of risk factors for stalking and for unwanted pursuit behavior, including the initiation of a breakup by the perpetrator's ex-partner. We see more anxious attachment in the former relationship. So when a relationship seems to be kind of at the beginning of stalking, when it came from a failed relationship, we see that anxious attachment. And that's interesting if we think about borderline personality disorder, because it does have an association with anxious attachment. We believe what happens here is the rejection elicits more obsessive thoughts about the ex-partner. And again, that's fairly consistent with borderline personality disorder, with a few of the aspects, but that would include, as I mentioned before, the chronic feeling of emptiness. We also see that ex-intimate stalkers often have a history of criminal convictions and mental health problems, including higher levels of borderline personality traits, as I mentioned before. Some factors, though, when we talk about different personality factors and things like that, some of these factors have no explanatory value at all, meaning they don't appear to have any relationship with stalking. For example, avoidant attachment has no association with stalking. Empathy in the past relationship has no association, so a lot of people would think that low empathy would result in more stalking, but it doesn't. And we also see that psychopathic and narcissistic traits have no association to stalking, which I think is fairly surprising when we think about all the characteristics of psychopathy and narcissism. So what are the typical characteristics of a female stalker? So when there is a female stalker, whether she has borderline personality disorder or borderline personality traits or something else or nothing else, what characteristics might we expect to see? What would be typical? Well, we see a study here of 82 women who were involved in stalking, and we get kind of a profile from this study. It's pretty interesting. I'll put all the references for the studies I used in the description for the video. So here we see the typical characteristics would be Caucasian, heterosexual, having an age range between 18 and 58 with an average of 35, not having children, and being well educated. With this particular group of 82 women I'm talking about half had borderline personality disorder, and a third used substances while stalking. So there may be some comorbidity there with substance use disorder. The women in the study gave several reasons as to why they engaged in stalking behavior, which I think gives us some insight into what's going on in terms of mental health and personality characteristics. And the reasons were anger, obsessions, feelings of abandonment, dependency, and loneliness. So several of those, of course, could be tied to borderline personality features. The usual stalking behaviors manifested by this particular group, again, female stalkers in this study, included telephone calls, messages, giving letters and gifts, driving by the victim's home or work, trespassing, following a victim. And we also see that more than half of the women threatened their victims, a quarter were physically violent with their victims, and 3 of the stalkers committed murder. They killed their victims. So when we talk about stalking, whether we're talking about a male or female perpetrator, we're really talking about something quite serious. I know whenever I talk about borderline personality disorder or cluster B personality disorders and stalking and these related constructs, there are going to be a variety of opinions, people who agree or disagree with me. Please.
All right, so shout out to Dr. Todd Grande or Grand. I think it might be Grande. He probably just pronounces it Grand because he's unseasoned. But very good breakdowns of this. He does some great breakdowns of narcissistic personality disorder. I wish I wouldn't have talked about that so much because I think that one in bipolar will be the last personality disorders that I talk about. Because I'm going to talk about it quite a few.
Please put your thoughts in the comment section.
The one on NPD that he does is very interesting. So, all right, let's go back here. So, unfortunately, guys, I do have to let you go. Let me share this tab here. I have to let you guys go. All right, I have to take my family to the airport. They're going on a trip on their favorite rocket ship. So I have to go take them to the airport. So I appreciate you guys popping in here for this discussion. Now, we didn't get to get too in depth like how I usually like to in the reading because I had to go. But I will put on my wall the rest of the articles that I read when I was learning about borderline personality disorder. Again, I learned about it in pursuit of my college diploma, which I'll show you guys. Because it's so massive and beautiful, you know. Okay. I don't know. I know a lot of you guys don't know what this looks like. So hopefully, and not my people, but you know, the ones that come here for extracurricular activities. You see? Yeah. Yep. And it's in criminal justice and criminology. You can't really see that there. But in pursuit of my degree, I took a lot of courses in psychology, and specifically I did a whole class on personality disorder. So I really enjoyed it. That's why I'm here sharing it with you guys. You know, these passions come from, you know, my education, things that I've learned, my experiences working and things like that. So I hope that you guys enjoy this video. If you are just getting in here, you're late and you want to see what the video is about, make sure you guys replay, like, comment, subscribe, engage with the video, and I'll see you guys on the next one. All right, let me send you guys off with some Flora anthems. All right, and don't forget to support the stream.
Florabella on my screen, her smile it shines so bright. She's a queen with every scene, in the morning or the night. Recipes and good vibes flow, every video a gem. Her confidence it grows and grows, we're inspired like her friends. Unstoppable Flora, she's got that power, spreading her aura, blossoming like a flower. Through the highs and all the lows, she remains so strong. every share. We feel her energy, no storm too strong she can't bear. She's setting us all free, unstoppable flora. She's got that power, spreading her aura, blossoming like a flower. Recipes and good vibes flow, every video a gem. Her confidence, it grows and grows. We're inspired like her friends. Unstoppable flora, she's got that power, spreading her aura, blossoming like a flower. Through the highs and all the lows, she remains so strong. Her spirit always glows. She's where we all belong. Every share, we feel her energy, no storm too strong she can't bear. She's setting us all free, unstoppable flora. She's got that power, spreading her aura, blossoming like a flower. Through the highs and all the lows, she remains so strong. Her spirit always glows. She's where we all belong.
Battle's got power, Florabella stands tall. Every drip, every drop, watch the haters fall. Channel sharp as thorns, ain't taking no mess. Scroll through her feet, feel that queen's finesse. Vines tangle tight, but Flora breaks free. Roots so deep, can't mess with her tree. From the mud she rises, roses from the dirt. Every comment section she lays down hurt. Flora's anthem, blooming under pressure. Resilient, resolving, no lesser. Florabella's reign strong and relentless. Beauty in battle, queen sure defenseless. From the garden green to the concrete wall, Florabella, unstoppable, nature's child. Leaves whisper secrets, she's the loudest shout. From the channel buzzing, she never backs out. Seed of strength, through seasons she grows. In the face of doubt, her spirit glows. Cameras ain't a limit, she branches out. Thorns in her crown, she wears it no doubt. Flora's anthem, blooming under pressure. Resilient, resolving, no lesser. Florabella's reign strong and relentless. Beauty in battle, queen sure defenseless. Flora's anthem, blooming under pressure. Resilient, resolving, no lesser. Florabella's reign strong and relentless. Beauty in battle, queen sure defenseless.